Faites l'appel, s'il vous plaît, Monsieur le greffier.
Monsieur le connétable de Saint-Hélier. Madame le connétable de Saint-Laurent.
Présente.
Monsieur le connétable de Saint-Brélade.
Présent.
Monsieur le connétable de la Trinité.
Présent.
Monsieur le connétable de Saint-Pierre.
Présent.
Madame le connétable de Saint-Martin.
Présente.
Monsieur le connétable de Saint-Jean.
Présent.
Monsieur le connétable de Saint-Clément.
Présent.
Monsieur le connétable de Grouville.
Présent.
Monsieur le connétable de Saint-Ouen.
Présent.
Monsieur le connétable de Sainte-Marie.
Présent.
Monsieur le connétable de Saint-Sauveur.
Présent.
Monsieur le deputy Southern. Madame le deputy Laddie.
Présente.
Monsieur le deputy Tadier.
Présent.
Monsieur le deputy Luce.
Présent.
Madame le deputy Doublé. Monsieur le deputy Morel.
Présent.
Madame le deputy de Hegera.
Présente.
Monsieur le deputy Ayer.
Présent.
Monsieur le deputy Ward.
Présent.
Madame le deputy Alves. Madame le deputy Gardner. Monsieur le deputy Gorse.
Présent.
Monsieur le deputy Farnham. Madame le deputy Moore. Monsieur le deputy Mezek.
Présent.
Monsieur le deputy Joseph.
Présent.
Monsieur le deputy Balash.
Présent.
Monsieur le deputy Coles.
Présent.
Madame le deputy Poré. Monsieur le deputy Wall.
Présent.
Madame le deputy Miles.
Présente.
Madame le deputy Scott.
Présente.
Monsieur le deputy Venner.
Présent.
Madame le deputy Curtis. Madame le deputy Felton. Madame le deputy Binet. Madame le deputy Jeune.
Présente.
Madame le deputy Miller.
Présente.
Madame le deputy Howe.
Présente.
Monsieur le deputy Binet. Monsieur le deputy Ferry.
Présent.
Madame le deputy Kovac.
Présente.
Monsieur le deputy Curtis.
Présent.
Madame le deputy Ward.
Présente.
Madame le deputy Wilson.
Présente.
Madame le deputy Stevenson.
Présente.
Monsieur le deputy Andrews.
Monsieur le doyen.
Notre aide soit au nom de Dieu qui a fait les cieux et la terre. Amen. Seigneur Dieu, Père éternel et tout-puissant, qui a établi le gouvernement et la puissance de la terre, pour le règlement et pour la conduite du peuple, et qui nous a commandé d'avoir toujours pour but la gloire de ton saint nom. Nous te prions qu'il te plaise de donner à cette assemblée le don de conseil et de prudence, d'unir le cœur et les affections de tous ceux qui la composent, de la conduire tellement toi-même par ton Saint-Esprit que toute leur délibération est accompagnée de ta bénédiction. Réussisse au bien à tout soulagement du peuple, qu'il de plus de commettre à leur soin. Car nous t'en prions au nom et par le mérite de ton Fils bien-aimé Jésus-Christ, notre Seigneur, qui nous a enseigné de t'invoquer en disant: Notre Père, qui es aux cieux, ton nom soit sanctifié, ton règne vienne, ta volonté soit faite sur la terre comme au ciel. Donne-nous aujourd'hui notre pain quotidien, et nous pardonnons nos offenses, comme nous pardonnons à ceux qui nous ont offensés. Et ne nous amène pas en tentation, mais délivre-nous du mal. Car à toi est le règne, la puissance et la gloire, au siècle des siècles. Amen.
Monsieur le connétable de Saint-Hélier. Monsieur le deputy Southern.
Présent.
Madame le deputy Doublé.
Présente.
Madame le deputy Alves.
Défunt.
Monsieur le deputy Farnham.
Présent.
Madame le deputy Moore.
Défunt.
Madame le deputy Felton.
Présente.
Monsieur le deputy Binet.
I was slow on the mark, but Deputy Alves sent us a message earlier. She's got an urgent home situation that she needs to deal with, and she will hope to be in by 10 a.m. and had asked if she could be excusée.
Members content the deputy be marked excusé? Yes, Deputy Alves is marked excusé. Deputy Chair.
Yes, sir. I'd like to apologise to the Assembly, but I have a doctor's appointment at the end of lunchtime and I may be a bit late back to the Assembly. And depending on the agenda, of course, I will need to ask whether questions that I'm asking of the ministers need to be put at the end, for example, depending on how long this morning's agenda takes. Thank you.
Thank you. Les États sont constitués. On behalf of members, I should like to welcome His Excellency to the Chamber this morning. In the gallery, I'd like to welcome Bishop Fanwell from the Diocese of Northern Malawi. And I'd like to read to members a letter that the bailiff has sent this morning to His Majesty the King. Your people in Jersey have learned with concern the news regarding Your Majesty's health. That you have chosen to make public your illness can only give hope and support to those who are facing similar challenges. May we assure you, sir, that you are in the thoughts and in the prayers of the people of Jersey, and we wish you well for a speedy and complete recovery. We now move to the consolidated order paper. There is a subordinate enactment under B, a number of documents presented or laid under C. The following matters have been lodged under D. Seaside Cafe at Greve de Lec, acquisition by the Public and Transfer to the National Trust, P5, an amendment lodged on the 29th of January by Deputy Stevenson. Ceasefire in Gaza, P7, lodged on the 29th of January by Deputy Tadier. And Cabinet Office Expenditure Savings, P8, lodged on the 5th of February by Deputy Andrews. There's nothing under E, and under F, the Assembly will be considering a number of appointments this morning. And the first item is the selection of the chair of the Public Accounts Committee. In accordance with Standing Order 119, the Assembly is due to appoint a new chair of this committee. I invite members to make nominations for the chair of PAC. Deputy Feltham, Deputy Joan? Deputy Feltham first.
Thank you, sir. I would like to nominate Deputy Inna Gardner.
Thank you very much. Is that seconded?
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much. Are there any other nominations? If there are no other nominations, I invite Deputy Gardner to speak for up to 10 minutes, after which there'll be a period of questions for up to 20 minutes. Deputy Gardner.
Thank you, sir. Sir, I would like to thank Deputy Feltham, the outgoing chair of PAC, for nominating me. And whilst I wish her the best on the executive side, and also to my seconder, who was a fellow member of my previous term as the head of PAC, the Constable of St. John. Here we again. So I decided to put my name forward to the position of the chair of PAC to ensure continuity and also see through recommendations from the PAC legacy report that I signed back in 2022. It was amazing déjà vu when I yesterday prepared and I found this report and looked through recommendations that I've done together with committee less than 2 years ago. And I'm grateful for the outgoing PAC for taking forward and looking at this. Having Deputy Feltham's support also means the handover will be easy for me at least. I would like to start my speech with a bit of history. When I first elected to this assembly in March 2019, I expressed an interest to join scrutiny panels, and Senator Ferguson asked me if I would like to join PAC. I would like to acknowledge her support and her willingness to pass on her knowledge to me, even though that we had quite different political views. I was inspired by Senator Ferguson's spirit, her strength, her honesty, and unflinching ability to take the hard task of examining the implementation of policy and holding senior government officers to account. And I'm grateful for her mentoring and support at my first stage at the States. This is kind of States Assembly I aspire to be part of. PC is a very diverse and exciting committee, and I find myself working with a team of politicians and lay people for good of the whole island. We hold the chief executive, chief officers, and other senior government officers to account, and we scrutinize where they have effectively and successfully implemented the policies that we, politicians, have spent hours debating and agreeing upon, and how it can be improved. The PAC looks at where and how government spends all the money, and yes, we do still have a lot of numbers to look at, but we are really lucky to have highly competent Controlling Auditor General Lynn Parman to help, and I look forward to reconnecting with her again. I have already had a conversation with Deputy Feltham and the officers, and I'm aware that the report for the follow-up review for performance management should be signed last week, and it is now a new committee task, and I'm committed to take it forward as quick as possible. Other planned work streams for 2024 include spending in health. I would like to look into the recruitment and how HR functions work. Procurement, it's a big task, and complaints process. I have moved from doing the work to checking the work, and I believe both roles are equally important, and I will dedicate myself to fulfilling this role to the best interest of Jersey and its people. Members hopefully heard about and know about my collaborative approach, and I would like to take this opportunity and invite members who are interested in joining the Public Accounts Committee, please get in touch. And thank you in advance for your trust, and I look forward for your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Gardner. Are there any questions? Deputy Kovach.
Thank you, sir. The candidate mentioned she would like to look at procurement. Can she explain exactly what areas of the procurement she sees of needing to be looked into?
Deputy.
Thank you, Deputy, for your question. I think, first of all, the procurement as a whole, because procurement incorporates several work streams, and being at the previous PAC, there are several concerns raised, and I'm sure that you've seen in the legacy report. Being on executive side that we need to progress with procurement, it's the delays, it's the professionalism, it's the options, it's about the advertisers. So for me, and always as maybe a deputy knows, when I work, I'm looking strategically, I'm looking around the piece as a whole, and after recognizing where are the weaknesses, and from there to make recommendations.
Supplementary?
Thank you. So is the candidate happy with the current procurement system that the government is using?
There are lots of gaps in the current procurement system, and as an ex-minister for children education, I had all education department couldn't get on with the procurement because they were on different system. So there are, again, I'm not going to look only into education department, but I know that was the same problem with in the health, the same problem with the police and others. So we do need to look into the procurement.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy Jean.
Thank you, sir. Could you outline what you hope to achieve by the end of the terms, what outcomes by 2026?
Thank you, Deputy, for her question. First of all, and there are so many recommendations outstanding from Controller and Auditor General and from PAC. And it's extremely important if government accepted recommendations that can improve efficiency and can improve the delivery, we must ensure that recommendations are implemented. So to follow up for the recommendations, to make sure that we have a golden thread. We have so many different things that are not connected, from KPIs to the well-being list. So we make sure that everything that's done has a connection and follow each other. And also for me, customer feedback and complaint, how we really work with our public and make sure that they receive the best service possible.
Thank you. Supplementary?
Thanks, sir.
Deputy Scott.
Thank you, sir. It's understood that there was a tracker of the recommendations that have been made by the Controller and Auditor General, with different departments and different officers being assigned responsibility for implementing them. How might you provide more traction in getting recommendations implemented?
Deputy.
Thank you, Deputy, for her question. And actually, we started the recommendation tracker together with Deputy back in 2019 as members of the same Public Accounts Committee. During 2021, during my chairman of the PAC, we moved to different system. And I always criticized that it was so many, I said, different shades of amber, because we couldn't see if it's 1% or 20% or 50%, and what does it mean in practice. Now, when I'll be elected, one of the first things I would like to see the current stage of recommendations tracker. I definitely will hold one-to-one with the CEO to make sure that we have trackers and we can go from 1 month to other months to follow up actually what's happened and what's been implemented.
Supplementary?
No, thank you, sir.
Thank you. Deputy Wilson.
Thank you, sir. Could the Deputy explain what method she will employ to ensure the voice of islanders is reflected in the scrutiny process?
Deputy.
Thank you for the Deputy for her question. I think that if I'm looking back when we had performance management review in 2021, 2022 and estate management review, we wrote to more than 120 stakeholders. We wrote to charities, we wrote to the community group, we wrote to the businesses and asked for the submission. Some submissions were private, some submissions were public. We have considered and make sure that the public views being held. Obviously, it's also our reaching out and asking, what do you think about procurement? What difficulties you experience? It depends on really the theme of the review, but I definitely committed for reaching out to all stakeholders that we would consider as a committee relevant to the review and seeking their view.
Supplementary?
No, sir, thank you.
Deputy Andrews.
Thank you, sir. Can the candidate explain the difference between the Public Accounts Committee and the 5 other scrutiny panels?
Thank you, Deputy, for his question. In general terms, Public Account Committee scrutinizing the offices and implementation, scrutiny panels scrutinize ministers and proposed policies and legislation. Saying this, it's important to emphasize there are always grey areas, which not sure if it's implementation or it's still policy under development. And personally, I believe working across the panel, and if we have an issue that touching policy that's still developed but been presented, but we have implementation stage, we might need to create review panels that everyone from scrutiny and the Public Accounts Committee representative can contribute.
Thank you. Supplementary? Deputy Salia.
Some of the work of PAC, not entirely, it is retrospective, and we'll look at spending for the last couple of years. Does the candidate believe that it's slightly problematic that she'll effectively be scrutinising her own, the government that she was a part of, and what they've been doing with their spending plans for the last 2 years? And how can she reassure members that she'll do that robustly if she needs to?
Thank you. I think it's a really good question and fair question. First of all, I'm scrutinizing officers from all departments for their delivery. And again, I've been fair. I said to my officers, the department that I was minister of, where I saw that they delivered and where I saw they didn't deliver. So it will not be a surprise to the officers from children education, people and skills department, where they know that they haven't delivered what they promised. Saying this, I always take politics out of the scrutiny. For me, scrutiny and Public Accounts Committee is apolitical. And the third point I would like to make, actually Public Accounts Committee, it's not just about accounts. I think major work, and we have a Controller and Auditor General that supports. I always had committee that have representations from the cross assembly, so this will ensure that we have balanced views, and I can commit that we'll have representations across the assembly. We have lay members who bring their knowledge of accounts, that bring the knowledge of audit. And if I'm going back what I started, it's about the governance, it's about effectiveness, it's about performance. There are lots of other items that Public Accounts Committee looking at, and not just numbers.
Supplementary? Are there any other questions for Deputy Stevenson?
Thank you, sir. How would the candidate propose to deal with potential conflicts of interest if they may arise in the work of her panel?
Deputy.
Thank you. And at PAC agenda, when I was chair of the Public Accounts Committee, conflict of interest is the standing item on the agenda after who is present, who is not, and if any new conflict of interest. So every sitting of the Public Accounts Committee will check if any conflict of interest arise. And if it is, the person, the member of the panel will not take part in the hearing or discussions or in that part of work of the committee.
Constable Brillard.
Thank you, sir. Scrutiny panels generally, in my experience, have produced some very good comprehensive reports on various matters. Would the candidate agree that reports produced need to be palatable and easily digested so everybody can understand the gist of what the message is? Thank you, sir.
I can't agree more with the Conotab. I think if we cannot express our recommendations and findings and the content in fewer pages, that it will be clearly understood by the public, we don't do the job. It needs to be clear, straightforward, less, but straight to the point. Thank you.
Any more questions for, yes, Deputy Coles.
Thank you, sir. The Public Accounts Committee doesn't just look retrospectively, it can look proactively at policies that are already in place. With that in mind, can the candidate outline any major capital projects that she would be keeping an eye on during her term?
Deputy.
Thank you. First of all, I would meet with CNG, because I know that CNG had a report about the capitals project and we need to look. And as I did previously, estate management was one of my key reports, and I looked at the capitals project, and actually I'm pretty pleased to see the Ficker House on the Royal Square was refurbished. I remember taking pictures when Photo was presenting the report that it was in awful state, and now we have refurbished building. So absolutely, we will need to and what's important that when we will have all chairs selected and scrutiny liaison committee will meet, that will make sure that we are not doing double work, and it needs to be distributed right between the panels, or we would create, I would say, if you're thinking about the hospital, I believe that hospital deserve own standalone panel with representative from the PSC on it.
Supplementary?
Yes, thank you, sir. As a previous member of the panel, and we've asked questions of officers around an IT strategy, and with a number of large capital projects on the agenda regarding IT infrastructure, is that an area that should be interested in?
Absolutely. ITS program and IT infrastructure was part of the previous work. I recognized and then looked through the performance that it was included in this review, and it's something that we'll need to keep eye on it because the expenditure around IT gone above and beyond, and the outcomes, I would say, questionable.
Any further questions for Deputy Gardner? Not, then I can confirm that Deputy Gardner has been appointed chair of the public.
I would like, sir, to thank you, members, and I invite everyone who would like to join the committee, express interest and connect to me. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy. In accordance with Standing Order 120, the Assembly is due to appoint a new chair of the Corporate Services Scrutiny Panel. In accordance with Standing Order 121A, the Chief Minister and the Minister for Treasury and Resources should neither nominate nor vote in relation to this appointment, whether they are both able to ask questions. A number of people have put their lights on, and in relation to nominations, I expect. And the first to do so was Deputy Dern, then Deputy Garner, then Deputy Dougley. Yes.
Thank you, sir. I would like to nominate Deputy Miles for the Chair of Corporate Services.
Thank you. Is that nomination seconded?
Yes, sir.
Are there any other nominations? Deputy Labby?
Yes. Excuse me. I'd like to propose Deputy Montford Tadier.
Is that nomination seconded?
Yes, sir. Sir.
Are there any other nominations? In accordance with Standing Order 120, I would invite the candidates to speak and answer questions in the order in which they were nominated. And in the circumstances, I invite Deputy Tadier to withdraw for the period of the speech of Deputy Miles and her questions. Yes, Deputy Miles, you are able to, as you know, speak for up to 10 minutes, and then we'll face up to 20 minutes of questions. Deputy Miles.
Thank you, sir. I'd like to begin by thanking the outgoing scrutiny panel for their work to date. And if appointed, I look forward to engaging with them in their new ministerial roles and evaluating their legacy work. I'm standing for this role today because I want to ensure that this panel can fulfil its role within our system of government, holding the Chief Minister and Minister for Treasury and Resources to account, and ensuring that government policies are evidence-based, proportionate, and make a positive difference to the lives of islanders. Although I'm still relatively new to this Assembly, I'm not new to public service, and I believe that I'm well equipped to take on the role of Chair of the Corporate Services Scrutiny Panel. Sir, I've worked for over 30 years for the States of Jersey, leaving in 2018. My career included time working across a number of States departments, including probation and aftercare, home affairs, and the former Department of Community and Constitutional Affairs, operating as a policy director for the former Chief Minister in her capacity as Home Affairs Minister. In parallel to my civil service role, I cultivated an academic career. I hold a PhD in Applied Social Sciences, gained through part-time study over a period of 8 years. And my strong academic background has developed critical thinking skills and the ability to balance competing perspectives. I'm able to assimilate large amounts of information quickly, gather evidence in different contexts using different methods, design complex research projects, author and disseminate reports and reviews for different audiences. I've published articles in local, national, international journals, and I also published a book about the role on the honorary system and its importance to Jersey. I've held academic positions at University College Jersey, the Institute of Law in Jersey, and as a Fellow of the Hillary Rodham Clinton School of Law at Swansea University. From a leadership perspective, whilst working for the States of Jersey Police, I was selected by the Senior Police National Assessment Centre for a place on the Strategic Command course, the most prestigious leadership programme in British policing. Graduates of this programme qualify as senior leaders who are suitable for appointment to chief police officer roles throughout the UK. I was especially proud to be the first woman from the Channel Islands to attend and pass this programme. So outside my professional life, I was a founder member of a very highly successful local charity. As chair and vice chair, I led the development of the organisation from a small group of parents to a professional business that provides outstanding accredited services. I've actively participated in many and varied groups in a lay capacity, including as a member of the steering group on the Citizens' Jury on Assisted Dying on behalf of Deputy Richard Renouf, and on the Access to Justice Working Group as a representative of the Chief Minister of the time. The assisted dying work in particular required absolute impartiality to ensure that the evidence presented to the jury was factual and balanced. More recently, as Minister for Justice and Home Affairs, I chaired ministerial groups and led discussions about complex issues, in particular the Ministerial Safeguarding Group, which brought people together to focus on challenging issues that can have a profound impact on the lives of islanders. I've had exposure to scrutiny and the process from several different perspectives. I have given evidence to panels in a personal capacity, in both private and public hearings. I've contributed to reviews through my charity role and as part of the Student Loan Support Group, and I found the process to be very effective in listening to my views, and I was heartened to see how the process held relevant ministers to account for matters that affected me, my family, and people affected by policy decisions. In my role as Policy Director, my interaction with the scrutiny process was twofold. As a senior leader, I attended quarterly hearings with my minister to provide support and detailed feedback about both operational and policy issues. And from a legislative perspective, I led the development of a number of laws that were successfully passed by the Assembly. And there are two in particular that are worthy of note. The Criminal Procedure Law and the Sexual Offences Law, both passed in 2018, modernised the landscape of criminal justice in Jersey. I can honestly say that these two laws were considerably improved due to the engagement of scrutiny at a very early stage. I ensured close liaison with members throughout the development process, rather than at the end. The members of the panel offered alternative perspectives and proposed realistic alternatives to tricky concepts. And this element of combined consultation was very welcome. This way of working also ensured that very tight timescales could be honoured. And Deputy Mezek will, I'm sure, remember the impact of working in such a collaborative way. In 2019, after I'd left the employ of the States of Jersey, I applied to be a lay member of the Public Accounts Committee under the chair of Deputy Anna Gardner. This proved to be a very positive experience, and we worked on the performance management review, producing a comprehensive set of findings and recommendations that have recently been addressed by the outgoing scrutiny panel. It was a great opportunity to develop questioning skills and work within a highly motivated team to achieve positive outcomes. And partly as a consequence of my role on a successful term on the Public Accounts Committee, I decided to stand for election as Parish Deputy in 2022. Subsequently, in my ministerial role, I was scrutinised by the Children and Home Affairs panel, and I thoroughly enjoyed working with that scrutiny panel. For my part, I ensured that panel members were invited to every event, conference or workshop that I held as Minister, and were made aware at an early stage of potential issues that might affect the public related to my ministry. I valued their views and their contribution, and more importantly, their challenge. They were truly a critical friend and helped me to make better decisions. The Work Permit Review panel provided important findings that have driven improvement, and again, I highly valued their contribution. As a result, discussions began to make changes to some areas of practice and I was able to commission a new a permit worker portal to support communication and exchange of information before I departed my ministerial role. Sir, the Corporate Services Panel has a very broad remit, holding the Chief Minister and Minister for Treasury and Resources to account. The departments within are significant, comprising 10 different areas of focus, including communications, modernisation and digital, people services, ministerial support, statistics and analysis, strategic finance and commercial services. Scrutiny is often described as a critical friend, and it's important that the first part of the term is not the most dominant. A critical friend is one who builds and maintains relationships of trust, brings relevant knowledge and experience, motivates and reassures, understands the complexities of the change progress, is an advocate for the success of the work, and perhaps most importantly, is concerned for the outcomes and effectiveness of the policy or law that's under scrutiny. I believe that scrutiny done well can be constructive, productive, influential and transformational. There is much to do, and we need to be working to our strengths to maintain momentum and to nurture the trust and confidence of the public in the scrutiny process. As a result of my breadth of experience, I feel that I'm able to bring stability, energy and leadership to deliver effective challenge across this broad portfolio. I have the knowledge, skills and experience to develop a team that will be diligent and objective in our work, will question objectively, challenge appropriately, listen to the public and make positive contribution. If I'm appointed to this role, I will ensure the panel provides robust, evidence-based, forensic and constructive scrutiny of the Chief Minister and the Minister for Treasury Resources. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Deputy Miles. Do we have questions for Deputy Miles? Deputy Gardner.
Would the candidate advise which practices she would implement in her chairing the panel? Around the teamwork, about doing the reviews and others.
The first thing that I would be looking to do is actually to establish a very diverse panel. As I've mentioned, it's a very diverse portfolio and we will need a range of expertise from across the Assembly in order to help us address the challenge. I would be liaising with the chair of the Scrutiny Liaison Committee to establish training for any new members, not only in questioning skills, but also in team building. We haven't got long left, we've got 2 years, and it's very important that people can work very quickly, collaboratively, and in a focused way to deliver successful outcomes.
Supplementary?
And thank you for candidate for the question, and how the candidate would engage with the public.
The voice of the public is critical to scrutiny, and the voice of the public, I think, in these days is becoming more and more difficult to hear. Apart from the measures that have been mentioned before in the traditional social media and mainstream media ways, I think it's actually very important to go out and seek hard to reach views. I would certainly be looking at the youth service and the children's service from a children's participation point of view. Quite often children and young people are not heard when it comes to scrutiny reviews. So I think we'd have to think very carefully about how we reach the public. And of course, we have an excellent communication team at the States Gref who could be used to their full advantage.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy Mezek.
Thank you, sir. The outgoing panel was part of the way through a review on people and culture and had received quite a lot of very powerful testimonies from people working across the public service about the issues that they face at work and what the government could or should be doing to improve those. Could I ask the candidate if it's her intention to pick up and carry on with that review, which was only part of the way through, or would she be planning not to do that?
I thank the Deputy for the question. As part of the preparation for today, I had a long conversation with the panel officer who explained to me the status of the People and Culture Review and also some of its background. My plan would be to go ahead to bring that report to a conclusion as soon as possible using existing evidence. There's clearly been substantial evidence gathered to date and a lot of submissions. And I believe from what she tells me that other areas have come out of the People and Culture Review that will also require some attention, areas such as occupational health and well-being, which weren't originally envisaged. So if I am successful, it would be my intention to bring this review to a conclusion and to get it published.
Supplementary. Deputy Kovac.
Thank you, sir. Can you give can the candidate give an example of a review where she has been out of the comfort zone?
I'm sorry, sir, could you just, the deputy, just repeat the last bit of the question, out of the...
When the deputy has been out of her comfort zone on a review.
Out of your comfort zone.
I thank you for the question. This deputy is out of her comfort zone most of the time, I have to say. Yes, there have been many times. I was actually quite apprehensive about joining the Public Accounts Committee because I don't have a background in Treasury and finance. But through drawing on the expertise of others, having lay members, and actually being prepared to listen and take advice from people who know much more about the subject than I do, that is how I help myself come slightly back into a comfort zone.
Supplementary.
And the deputy has mentioned she has been part of a few reviews. Can she give an example of a list of the reviews she's been part of?
From a scrutiny perspective, as when I was a lay member, I was part of the performance management review. That is the only review that I have been part of contributing to that review. But I have given evidence to social security reviews. Certainly my role at Autism Jersey has seen me give evidence to panels over disability issues, and also from the Student Loan Support Group perspective, trying to gain a policy position on funding students for higher education. As I've said, I was on the steering group for the Citizens' Jury on Assisted Dying, and generally throughout my career I have acted as either lead or contributing to various views, reports and panels.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy Scott.
Thank you, sir. What experience does the candidate have that would enable or support her to pursue value for money objectives in government administration?
Certainly, when you're looking at value for money reviews, there needs to be an understanding of the nature of the operation that is being performed. So my recent experience over value for money reviews has been as a result of the value for money reviews that were being imposed on the Home Affairs Department. So in terms of skills to deal with that, again, it is about assimilating information quickly, understanding the operational impact, and challenging departments who will often say that we don't have enough money, and challenging them in looking at different ways of achieving objectives.
Supplementary?
Yes, please. And given that the panel has a macroeconomic role, does the candidate feel that the business community has an adequate voice in the work of the CSFP?
I can't talk for panels that have gone before, but as I said in my speech, I give an undertaking that we will be consulting widely with the business community. As the deputy will know, scrutiny are able to use experts in specific fields, and perhaps that is one area where some expert advice might be required.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy Jeanne.
Thank you, sir. Would the candidates explain what the intended outcomes would be for 2020 by 2026? So what would the candidate hope to achieve by the end of the term?
Thank you for the question. I am known, certainly in my ministerial role, I was known as being quite productive. And I think I would like to increase the productivity of the panel. Again, having spoken to the panel officer yesterday, there are a number of laws that are likely to be coming forward for scrutiny, including the Charities Law, the Inquest Law, the Controller and Auditor General Law. From a government plan perspective and certainly a CSSP perspective, I guess that will depend on the current Council of Ministers and whether there are going to be any revisions to those plans. What I would hope is that we will certainly have undertaken at least 2 full reviews by the end of the term.
Yeah, supplementary.
No, sir, thank you.
Deputy Rob Ward.
Thank you, sir. Just a slight change to my question after so many answers. Can I ask the Deputy whether there's an example of scrutiny or the outcomes of scrutiny where an opinion at the start may have been changed by the outcome of that scrutiny process? Thank you, sir.
I think the best example I can give is probably around the work permit review. When initially we were under the impression that actually communication was fairly good, what we were doing was probably the right direction to head in. But actually after careful consideration of that report, it became apparent that we could be doing much more, and actually the messaging wasn't hitting perhaps where it should have been. So that's one example I can give.
Yes.
Thank you, sir. One of the ways in which my views changed during scrutiny was when we engage with young people. And can I ask the Deputy how she may engage, particularly with school children, to educate them in the process of scrutiny and the importance of engagement of scrutiny and wider politics in the island? Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. I'm aware that we have a political education group within the state's GREF, and they do very good work bringing the Year 5s into the Assembly and explaining the role, etc. We also have within children, young people, education and skills, participation standards, which really set the direction for how we should engage with young people. I think it's very important that children's voice is heard in everything we do, and quite often they're the last voices that we listen to. Perhaps in some areas they should be the first.
Deputy. Deputy Miller.
Thank you, sir. I think the candidate has probably already answered my question part. Does the candidate already have a view, personally, on specific areas which she believes should be scrutinised over the next couple of years, or will she develop a work plan in collaboration with relevant ministers?
Thank you. Clearly, if I'm appointed today, I'd want to be talking to the panel about the specific priorities and the specific order that we would do that. My approach is very collaborative, and I would be wanting to talk to ministers, both informally and formally, about actually where those ministers can get the best value out of scrutiny, because ministers can't do everything, and sometimes scrutiny can be very supportive in that role. I have to say, talking to the officer yesterday, and in view of some of the comments that have been made publicly, I would think that one of the first areas of work, not necessarily a top priority, but one of the first areas of work would be around the role of the Jersey Public Services Ombudsman, and actually where we are with that, given that it was a 100-day priority for the former Chief Minister, but there seems to have been some declaration that will not be a priority for the current Council of Ministers.
Supplementary. Thank you. Conatarbus and Brillard.
Thank you, sir. We often get criticised here for the move from the committee system of government to ministerial. Does the candidate consider that the scrutiny structure that we have actually replaces the committee system which we had before, and how might she better exploit that? Thank you, sir.
I thank the Conatar for his question. I am actually old enough to remember the committee system, and I think when I joined the civil service in the mid-1980s, we still had a defence committee that we were responsible to. I don't think anything can actually ever replace the committee system. Obviously, we have a different system, but the scrutiny panels and committees, I guess, are the nearest thing to what we had. I think the scrutiny panels can be well exploited, in particularly liaison with the parishes and liaison with the Comité de Connétable. I think they're a very useful vehicle for feeding in disparate views from the parishes into the decision-making process.
Thank you. Parliamentary.
So yes, very often we've experienced sometimes clashes between scrutiny panels and, can I say, obstreperous ministers, no, not naming anybody in particular, but how would you propose to deal with personality clashes in those situations? Thank you, sir.
I think dealing with personality clashes and conflict is almost an everyday occurrence for a states member. Certainly in my work experience, it has been quite a feature, shall I say. I think when you have a chair of a panel who is setting out a very clear vision and focusing on the outcomes, I think it's much easier to achieve consensus. Everybody's view is important and everybody's view needs to be taken into account. And I think by focusing on the outcome, it means that there is a lot of space for different voices and opportunities to resolve conflict in a very respectful and dignified way.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy Stevenson.
Thank you, sir. How would the candidate manage conflicts of interest should they arise during her work chairing the panel?
I thank the Deputy for the question, and I am going to echo Deputy Gardner's response. I think it's very important that all conflicts of interests are declared. And we have a curious system where we sort of declare formal conflicts of interest. But I do think there is something about informal conflicts of interest in a community that is so small. I don't know how we get to declaring relationship conflicts of interest other than those that are obvious, I'm married to, or so-and-so is my partner. But I do think it is something that we need to give some consideration to.
Yes, sir. Does the candidate think that members of scrutiny could do well with some training potentially in conflicts of interest?
I think that is one area where scrutiny would benefit. But I think, we have a lot of new members in the Assembly. I certainly benefited from some really excellent training that was put on when I was a member of the Public Accounts Committee, helping me not just understand the role of scrutiny, but actually practical things like questioning skills, actually working together as a team to achieve a specific outcome during a specific hearing. But I do think, and I know PPC are looking at codes of conduct, and I know there will be some questions around perhaps changes to the Commissioner of Standards, but I think conflict of interest is a particular issue that we should never lose sight of. Sometimes the training we've had I describe as a bit of a sheep dip. You kind of get it in the first week, and then 2 years later you can't really remember what went on because such a lot went on the first week, and I think it's necessary that that point is raised.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy Southern.
Thank you, sir. The candidate just mentioned productivity and how to improve the productivity of a panel. Could you say how she would measure productivity in any panel?
I'm a great fan of outcomes-based accountability, which obviously focuses on outcomes as success factors. So the way to measure productivity really is to look at how much you've done, how well you've done it, but really the most important thing is actually anybody better off, because we could churn out lots and lots of reports, but actually if they don't have the impact on the community and they don't drive change, there's very little point in producing them. So I'd actually have quite a laser focus on the outcomes, ensuring that actually at the end of these reports, the public will be better off.
Parliamentary.
Thank you, sir. One of the skills required in scrutiny is the ability to say, this inquiry stops now. It's whatever it says, we publish it, and that's what we're going to say. So drawing things to an end is one of the skills the candidate would need. To what extent has she got those skills?
I thank the Deputy for the question. There's something called the Nimrod effect, isn't there? The Nimrod aircraft that never ever got finished because people kept adding bits and pieces to it. The key to that is to have a very firm terms of reference at the beginning of the review and actually understand what you're aiming to do, what you're aiming to achieve, and do that. That doesn't mean to say that there may be some bits of the evidence that you've gathered that warrant further work at a later stage. But in order to deliver on time and deliver according to the remit, I think the terms of reference is the key to that.
Deputy Howell.
Thank you, sir. I just wondered if the Deputy could explain what she will do as chair of a panel if the recommendations of her panel are not taken seriously by a minister. Thank you, sir.
Again, I think that comes down to the use of the evidence. We should be following the evidence. We should be following them in an impartial way. And I do wonder, and I did have some experience of this over the work permit panel review, I think I misunderstood some of the recommendations. So I think it's very important that the recommendations in those circumstances are revisited so that the Minister is very clear about what the panel is suggesting should happen.
Supplementary? There's 50 seconds left. The final question for... No? So, Deputy Miles, can I invite you please to withdraw? And Deputy Tellier, please could return to the chamber. Deputy Elliott, you now have up to 10 minutes to address the Assembly, and you'll then face up to 20 minutes of questions.
Thank you, sir. It's always a slight disadvantage to go second, just because you normally need 1 minute to get your breath back, but I'll do that now. First of all, we've been focusing quite a lot on ministers for the last few weeks and months, and I think that's been natural. And I think it's nice that the Assembly can now get back to focusing on maybe an equally important area, that of scrutiny, now that the dust has settled. So it's been a privilege to put myself forward for the role of Chair of the Corporate Services Scrutiny Panel. And for clarification, for anyone listening, the panel looks at the work of the Chief Minister's Department and that of the Treasury Minister. To put things clearly, I would like to break this presentation into two parts. The first to demonstrate my understanding of the role and the value of scrutiny, and the second to show why I believe I'm the best candidate for this position. From my perspective, scrutiny is not the poor relation to the more lofty work of ministerial office. For me, ministerial and scrutiny roles have equal value, both the vital functions of this Assembly. And as someone who learnt the political ropes from the backbenches, the value and the clear principles of the scrutiny function are hardwired into my political DNA. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, from 2009, just after being elected, I cut my political teeth on the Education and Home Affairs Scrutiny Panel. It was chaired at that time by Deputy Roy Laharisia. I think some members may remember him. I certainly remember him fondly. And he's still with us, by the way. This isn't any kind of obituary for him. He was, in many ways, an ideal mentor. He's somebody who had long states experience. He was always able to see both sides of the argument. The joke was that he could find a fence in the middle of the desert. And he was also a really clear communicator. You could hear him, basically. But joking aside, crucially, he was one of those politicians who was around when ministerial government was still introduced. So he remembered the committee system. And he was also one of those who was first introduced to scrutiny. I think it was called shadow scrutiny back then, and it came in officially. And so he, like those older members, were very much aware of the sound principles and the need for constructive and effective scrutiny in this new ministerial system. But we're no longer in 2009, we're in 2024. And as a senior politician now and a scrutineer, I am now seeking to put all of my skills and experience to good use in this role. I think it's important that we go back to basics in scrutiny, and I would summarise that in the following three ways. The first is that scrutiny is not there to create alternative policy, but to review policy and legislation from ministers. As scrutineers, our primary function is to hold ministers to account, and as Deputy Gardiner told us earlier, to do that, we lay our own personal thoughts and manifestos and preconceptions aside, and as Deputy Southern has told us so many times, we take off that hat and we put on our scrutiny hat. That's the first thing we do. The second is that there must be a presumption that scrutiny is done in public. I am keen to emphasise this point. I've seen a creeping move over the years to hearings and briefings taking place in private when they don't need to be. I know that there's a time and a place for receiving confidential submissions and briefings. I've sat on many reviews which deal, of course, with sensitive issues, and it's right that there are occasions where members of the public in particular can feel that they can give scrutineers information in private, and similarly there'll be sensitive issues that government need to talk to us about in private. But these should be the exception, not the rule. And the third point is simple. Scrutiny must be evidence-based. Good scrutiny leads to good government, provided, of course, that government listens. But if the process is right, then I believe that government will listen. So these are the three high-level principles that will guide me when carrying out the role. And it will be this objectivity, transparency of process, and an evidence-based approach that gives the panel's work and recommendations weight and credibility. Now, when it comes to an effective scrutiny panel, or effective scrutiny full stop, a chair is only as good as his or her panel, and the panel's only as good as its members. And of course, it's scrutiny officers, but we always have good scrutiny officers. And I would like to take this opportunity to commend the work that they do, often so unseen in the background, but adding so much value to that process. I'd also emphasise that there's no place for ego on scrutiny, but talent is, of course, always welcome. And I would like to put together a team with diverse strengths and experience from across the Assembly. And I thank those members who have already registered a desire to join or to rejoin the panel. Members will know that I have extensive and wide-ranging experience on various scrutinies over the last 15 years. These have included scrutinising things like the prison, the police, including the use of tasers, the use of CCTV, but also education, parks and gardens, housing, and environment. I won't labour the point, but I hope members will take all this experience into account and agree that I have done more than my apprenticeship in terms of scrutiny, and that I am very well placed to transfer this experience and these skills to lead the panel. This practical experience is also underpinned by excellent training that we've received over the years. I also have to commend the great work of the GREF staff who have provided training locally, but also abroad, in the UK, for example, drawing from our Commonwealth links that we've got with the CPA. And I, for one, am actually proud of those CPD opportunities that states members generally are given, and certainly scrutineers also benefit from them to this day. So this practical experience is underpinned by excellent training, ongoing CPD, including first-class seminars on question technique. I remember that we received back in the day, sir, from the Solicitor General of the day, Howard Sharp, I think I can mention his name, very good questioning technique on how not to let ministers get away with non-answers. And I have to say, departing slightly from my pre-written speech that I wrote, incidentally, is that I've seen examples of good scrutiny, mediocre scrutiny, and bad scrutiny. And the classic one is when the panel simply invites the minister to open up, and 10 minutes later he or she is still speaking. That's not the way to do it. You need to have that balance between open and closed questioning, and that's what we were reminded about. Know where you want to go with your questions. It's not simply tea and biscuits with the ministers. So, of course, that included CPA workshops, visits to select committee hearings in Westminster, but also in the other devolved assemblies of the home nations. And that's really, I think, an area that's helped me hone my questioning skills, and I hope become a highly effective scrutineer. Now, so I would like to turn to some of the more immediate work of the Corporate Services Scrutiny Panel. There's one urgent legacy issue which needs to be completed in short order. That's the follow-up to the People and Culture Review, which was published in 2021. I've spoken to the scrutiny officer, who agrees that there is now enough good evidence for this report to be concluded and published, and I would look to do that in short order. But there are some other urgent issues coming down the pipeline. I know that the ongoing panel were building up to a review of the Public Service Ombudsman. That's something that I would also wish to prioritise when that legislation finally comes through. It's currently with the Law Draftsman. And I know that there will also be a need to scrutinise the very important OECD Pillar 2 taxation rules that are coming forward to deal with tax challenges arising from the digitalisation of the economy. I also know that I would like to put a specialist sub-panel together to scrutinise this, but in any case, it's a review that will fall between both corporate services and international affairs more generally. I know we're coming to the 10-minute mark. I will emphasise the need for timely scrutiny, early legislation scrutiny, because we don't have a second chamber, so the role of scrutiny is more important. And I'll simply sum up by saying this. I know we'll get questions in a moment, sir. So, sir, I hope members will agree that I have all the skills and experience and ability to carry out this role to a high standard. I thank members for their attention in this matter, and I look forward to members' questions.
Thank you, Deputy. The first question is from the Connotab of St Saviour.
Thank you, sir. May I begin by very quickly mentioning that Sunday last I had lunch with former Deputy Laharissier, and both he and his good lady are indeed in excellent health. My question to the candidate, sir, is could the candidate, I know he's touched on this very quickly, outline his top 5 topics that he wishes to handle?
In a sense, it's not for me to say what the topics are. I mean, scrutiny is there to serve the Assembly and to look at legislation that comes forward. What I would say is that I hope we're going to see more legislation coming forward than we have in the last couple of years. But very much the Public Services Ombudsman is one that I very much support the principle of, and that the panel will need to see the fine detail of that. So I don't think I'll be able to give 5 necessarily. The taxation work is going to be crucial. And I think one good thing that the panel can do is set up sub-panels so that even if members don't necessarily wish to be permanent members of a scrutiny panel, they can come and join a panel for specific reviews. But there will be reviews that the public can also suggest. And I think the other part of my speech, which I didn't get round to, is the fact that we have to be responsive to the public when they suggest areas of scrutiny that maybe we and even ministers haven't thought of. Sorry if that doesn't answer the question directly.
Supplementary. Deputy Scott.
Thank you, sir. What experience does the candidate have that would enable or support him in pursuing to pursue value for money objectives in government administration?
Deputy.
So I've said in this Assembly before that there are 2 types of savings or inefficiencies. You can have inefficiencies because you don't invest enough in the first place, or you can have inefficiencies because you're spending too much money in the wrong places. So I'm very much open-minded to the fact that just because we spend money doesn't mean it's automatically well spent, and just because we save money doesn't automatically mean it's not well spent. I'll qualify that by saying I'm not going for the position of Public Accounts Committee, but it's important that all chairs, I think, are mindful of that. Can I also add that I know that one of the central pieces of work that the previous panel was doing was looking at the value for money savings and whether they were effective. So I would very much look to continue that piece of work as an ongoing process, which I think is fundamental to corporate services.
Supplementary.
Yes, please, sir. Given the panel's macroeconomic role, how would the candidate be ensuring that the business community have adequate input into the work of the panel?
So when I embark on a review, and I've done this with other panels, we sit down and we make sure that we have a full list of all the stakeholders that we need to engage with. And then we come back to that list a day after and make sure that we haven't forgotten anybody. So, of course, we would be inviting all of major stakeholders, but even the ones that sometimes get forgotten. But we also have to be mindful of the fact we have a fiscal policy panel, and we do listen to those. So scrutiny doesn't act in isolation. We have both standing and standing advisors we can call on, but also advisors that we can use on an ad hoc basis.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy Rob Ward.
Thank you, sir. I'll ask the same question of this candidate. Where can the candidate say they have had their mind changed or their view changed by a piece of scrutiny in the past? Thank you, sir.
That's a good question. I think it's right that even though we do take that hat off and put it on, we're all human, so we go into certain reviews maybe with certain prejudices. So I think 2 examples are probably around tasers and the use of CCTV. So I very much went into those reviews being anti-taser and being slightly sceptical about the use of CCTV. But by the end of it, certainly when it came to CCTVs, I saw the value of it. I saw that the police and the civilian members in the police really did take human rights seriously and data protection. And even on the issue of tasers, I was moved to a position of greater understanding where I was very softened to that being used in the portfolio of the police. So I hope that answers that.
Supplementary.
Thank you, sir. May I ask the candidate. One of the ways in which my opinion has changed in the past is from input from young people. How would the candidate ensure that young people are heard, and particularly school children, and given the value and the understanding of the process of scrutiny? Thanks, sir.
Yeah, and I think that's fundamental. So I think public engagement is something that that panels have done really well. I see them out in King Street. I've even heard they've been in Grand Marché, and that's not just recently. It's been a growing trend. And I think that scrutiny actually has a function to play in our schools as well. So we should be going into scrutiny, into schools, banging the drum for scrutiny, and telling youngsters that it's an equally important part of government and the Assembly's work.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy Byrne.
Thank you, sir. And the connotab earlier, I think, took the question I was going to ask in another angle. So I'd like to ask the candidate what emphasis will he place on the importance of an evidence-based approach to the work of scrutiny, and why do you think that this is important?
Thank you. I hope I addressed that very early on in my speech, but I'm happy to underline the importance of an evidence-based. Again, it is one of the three underpinning principles, and that would lead me. It's, of course, it's got to be fundamental, because we're not there to promote our own policies. We can do that as individual members, as backbenchers, we can bring propositions, but when it comes to that function, if it's not evidence-based, it's not going to stand up effectively. And I wouldn't want to bring anything to this Assembly or put anything with my name to it that hasn't been thorough, well-researched and evidence-based.
Supplementary? Deputy Mezek.
Thank you, sir. The outgoing Corporate Services Scrutiny Panel had been part of the way through a follow-up review on people and culture, and had received lots of very valuable testimonies from people working across the public service about the way that employees are treated and things that may need to change as a result of that. Could the Deputy confirm, if he is elected as chair of this panel, is it his intention to continue with that follow-up review, or will he look at doing things differently?
So I have spoken to the officer, the lead officer for that. I'd had a brief conversation with Deputy Mezek, and I've had a chance to look at the report that was originally published by Senator Moore's, then Senator Moore's panel in 2021. So I recognise this as a continuum. The scrutiny officer said that she believes there's enough evidence to publish that report now. It may well be that the report needs to be published as an interim with its interim findings, and it could well be that this is an area which the panel needs to keep an eye on going forward in the next couple of years, because I think workplace culture is fundamental, and we know that there are things across departments that need to change, but I think that message has been loudly understood by the new government, I would hope.
Supplementary. Deputy Stevenson.
Thank you, sir. How would the candidate manage conflicts of interest should they arise during their work chairing the panel?
Deputy.
Thank you. I slightly anticipated this question because I heard it asked to the now chair of PAC. And I think the very simple answer is that the code of conduct is very clear when it comes to conflicts of interest, is that you must identify and declare conflicts of interest and resolve them in the public interest. So that's what I would make sure that I do. And I don't think it's something that we necessarily do enough, if I can say that in an assembly. It used to be the case that you would jump up and offer potential conflicts of interest, and I think it's better to err to the side of caution and be told by the chair that actually that's not really a conflict of interest, but thanks for flagging it up. So I think the more transparency we can have, and if we can lead by showing transparent behaviour, then I think that's important. So thank you for that question.
Supplementary.
Yes, sir. Does the candidate think that scrutiny members would benefit from training on conflict of interest, not only in identifying their own, but where there could potentially be others in the work that they are scrutinising? And I would just add on, as part of that, to explore the relationship going forward when there are members of his political party in government, how that relationship may work with scrutiny members and ministerial members from the party.
I mean, I think, to be fair, one of the considerations of going for a chair was that I won't be scrutinising any of my party colleagues in these positions. So I think even if that were the case, I've got the capability to put that aside, because I certainly don't give my party colleagues an easy ride, whether it's in this assembly or in private meetings. And I won't be giving the Treasury Minister or the Chief Minister an easy ride, but similarly, I'll be there to do scrutiny properly and to do it objectively, so I don't have any scores to settle, but I want to see this government succeed, I want to see this assembly succeed, and I think that's in everyone's interest that scrutiny should be done properly.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy Gardner.
Thank you, sir. And the response to Conor of St. Sever actually pushed me to ask a different question. As Deputy, there is a people and culture review in the middle which needs to be concluded, and Deputy mentioned value for money and mentioned that it's important that the public will express opinion. At the same time, Deputy, when is standing to be a chair of the corporate services and been so long in the States and around, what would be your deputy's preference, or at least, if possible, to name some subjects for the possible reviews that will be discussed at the committee, but what deputy himself would propose for the reviews?
So the first thing we need to remember is that this government needs to have a period of time to produce its own strategic vision, which will then be scrutinised by scrutiny panels. I think the value for money savings is a fundamental piece of work that I would want to continue. And as I've said, I've seen examples of savings which are cuts in the past, which have led to problems now. But I've also seen areas that need more investment that haven't got that. And no doubt there will be areas of effective savings across the board. So until we know the work programme of this government, we can't really say what we'll be scrutinising. Like I said, we have to be reactive to government. And I'll wait for the supplement.
Absolutely. It's one approach to be reactive to the government. Second approach, Deputy mentioned, to listen to the public. What's Deputy's views? What are the public would like to see being scrutinised currently?
So I think in terms of the Chief Ministers and the Treasury Department, it's cost of living. I think fundamentally that the last government was correct. I think we all need to listen to people who are really finding cost of living difficult. I would be very surprised if the Chief Minister doesn't come forward with putting that at the top of his list. But similarly, any tax proposals that come forward from the Treasury Minister that might affect working people in Jersey and their disposable income, or if there are initiatives to try and ease that burden on lower and middle earners, then that will equally need to be scrutinised, but done objectively, not by substituting some idea that I've got of the ideal policy.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy Ozef.
Thank you, sir. So the new government is like all previous governments in Jersey, effectively a minority government, in the sense that the number of ministers and assistant ministers are a minority. This new government is a slightly new variant of a previous one that had namely members of the Reform Party. And I wish them sincerely well, and we all want the government, and as the candidate has said, we want the government to deliver and be properly scrutinised. My question, therefore, is, being that he is a long-standing member of Reform, how will he deal and manage the tensions that will inevitably rise, we just heard one on tax, in scrutinising areas of government policy, given his party allegiance? In what the very subject of the issue, one very good example is that of tax.
So I fundamentally disagree with the premise of that question. I could ask any member of this Assembly who's serving on scrutiny, who's been in the previous government, whether they've got a conflict of interest and whether they will approach it with a clean pair of hands. The difference is our manifesto is published. It's quite clear when I'm acting in the Assembly in a party capacity, and if, hopefully, when I'm acting in a scrutiny chair capacity, and I'll be under probably even more scrutiny than an independent member would be. So it's not in my interest to try and be biased in this. If I want to do political grandstanding and also bring propositions, I'll do that in my own name, as I have done with the ceasefire in Gaza, or I'll do it in the party name where it's been approved. But these are long-established principles that other parliaments throughout the Commonwealth deal with. And we've got to get to the point that having an overt party is not a dirty thing. Maybe having secret parties is the problem.
So I thank the candidate for his question. My follow-up is, my question is in no way negative or critical. I entirely understand the issue is developed in other places, but it isn't developed here. And on that issue of tax, if I could just ask him, he has got, absolutely, and he's right, and Reform are fine, they've got a stated position on tax. He's going to be, if he's successful, the chair of the panel that scrutinises the Treasury Minister. It's not a case of clean hands, but he can't, how will he deal with the tension, the absolutely open tension that he has in a declaration of a tax system or criticism of it against the Treasury Minister, who is known to have had quite soaring views on in the past. So it's an entirely constructive, how is he going to deal with the inevitability of the tensions that will arise? And I say this to make it work, not work.
Again, I reject the premise of that question. There is no inevitability about these tensions. We have different political opinions. There will be members who support progressive taxation. There are members who support regressive or the current level of taxation. I'm not here to represent my own political views on scrutiny. I'm there to speak to the Minister about what her objectives are, to talk to her officers about what her objectives are, and to scrutinise her policy. And I'll do that to the best of my ability, and I'll do that in an evidence-based and transparent way, with the help of my panel, which will be wide and diverse.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy Miller.
Thank you, sir. I think the candidate touched on this in his speech, but just in the interest of fairness, does the candidate already have a view on specific areas which he believes should be scrutinised, or will he develop a work plan in collaboration with the relevant ministers?
I think the move to independent taxation is going to be an area that definitely needs more scrutiny. We're seeing on today's order paper that we've got some small but important changes coming through because of the CEDAW recommendations and the fact that a very limited area of inheritance is basically sexist and it favours the paternal side of the family, so that there are always going to be areas that come through. So I think very fundamentally, I think previous governments have painted themselves into a very difficult corner when it comes to independent taxation because they haven't followed through the logical conclusions of what they're trying to do. But we know that change is difficult in the island, and I think that's where scrutiny can add value, to actually take people on that journey with us, to explain it to them, but also to listen to them about what their concerns are, and then bring recommendations to government in that regard.
Deputy Wilson.
Thank you, sir. Could the candidate outline what his intended outcomes will be in terms of the work of the panel?
When I look back to 2009, I was surprised just how productive the scrutiny panels, not because I was on them incidentally, but just we were very productive back then, producing review after review. And the key thing is not to let reviews go on for too long. So you need to know when is a good time to say, we've got the evidence, let's analyse the evidence, let's produce a report, publish it, and we stand by that review. So I'm not going to give a comprehensive list of what those future reviews might be, apart from the ones that I've already mentioned. But the point is that scrutiny needs to be chaired effectively and efficiently. It's in our interest, it's in government's interest to do that. And I go back to the point about early sight of legislation and policy. The more legislation we can do in advance means we don't need to call things in at a later stage, potentially to delay them. But if the government isn't coming forward with legislation, isn't giving it to us on time, then unfortunately things will have to get pulled in.
Thank you. Deputy Howell.
Very quickly, thank you, sir, was just to ask if, as chair of the panel, the Minister declines to accept your recommendations, what will you do? Thank you. What will the Deputy do?
I would hope that you've got a whole toolkit of powers of persuasion initially. So I think it's in the interest not to try and cut corners, because we've seen instances where recommendations are perhaps not being properly responded to, and that just delays the process for everyone. The scrutiny panel will get answers one way or the other, and if they're not done immediately, it simply means that we're wasting officers' time on both sides. So I think that message, I'm not anticipating any games to be played on either side. Whilst we have different political opinions, I fully believe that the two ministers I'll be scrutinising in their departments have integrity, and I look forward potentially to working with them on.
Thank you, Deputy. That brings the period of questions to an end. I invite Deputy Miles to return to the chamber. As there are two candidates, the electronic voting system will be used. Any member wishing to vote for Deputy Miles should press the pour button. Members wishing to vote for Deputy Tadier should press the conch button. Members may abstain if they wish in the usual way. I invite members to return to their seats. I ask the greffier to open the voting. All members have the opportunity of casting their votes. Then I ask the greffier to close the voting. And the votes cast were as follows. Deputy Miles, 25 votes. Deputy Tadier, 20 votes, and no abstentions. Therefore declare that Deputy Miles has been appointed as Chair of the Corporate Services Scrutiny Panel.
Sir, can we have the names, please?
Yes.
The members voting for Deputy Miles, the Connétable of St Brelard, St John, St Clement, Grouville and St Mary, and Deputies Luce, Doublé, Morel, Ayer, Gardner, Gorst, Ozef, Balash, War, Miles, Scott, Renouf, Rose Binet, Jearn, Howe, Ferry, Alex Curtis, Wilson, Stevenson and Andrews. And those members voting for Deputy Tadier, the Connétable St Helier, Trinity, St Peter, St Martin, St Juan and St Saviour, and Deputies Southern, Labby, Tadier, Lahegara, Rob Ward, Alves, Mesick, Coles, Porre, Catherine Curtis, Eltham, Tom Binet, Kovac and Barbara Ward.
Sir, can I have a point of clarification? I know one of the voters was an assistant minister in Treasury. I wondered if he was allowed to vote.
Yes, it's simply the ministers who are disabled from voting.
So can I congratulate the new chair and wish her all the best in the role.
Thank you, Deputy Tadier. Now move to the selection of the Chair of the Economic and International Affairs Scrutiny Panel in accordance with Standing Order 120. the Assembly is due to appoint a new chair of that panel. In accordance with Standing Order 121B, the Chief Minister and the Ministers for Sustainable Economic Development, External Relations and International Development should neither nominate nor vote in relation to the appointment, although they are able to ask questions. I invite members to make nominations for the chair of this panel, Deputy Miles.
Thank you, sir. I'd like to propose Deputy Jonathan Renouf.
Thank you. Is that seconded?
Yes, sir.
Deputy Kovacs?
Can I nominate Deputy Montfort-Tardieu, please?
Is that seconded?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. In that case, Deputy, I'm going to have to ask you to withdraw. But this time we're going to give you time to catch your breath when you get back.
I might go for a walk, sir.
Don't go for a run. It's my only advice. So, Deputy Renouf, you'll now have up to 10 minutes to address the Assembly and then face up to 20 minutes of questions. Deputy Renouf.
Thank you, sir. Let me start with an observation, perhaps a difficult observation. In economic terms, Jersey has been in decline for more than 20 years. That may be tough for us to face, but it is the truth. We have not managed to grow our economy in per capita terms once you take inflation into account since the turn of the century. Average earnings have also not grown since 2000. We have been kept afloat and continue to be kept afloat by the extraordinary performance of the finance sector. But even here, productivity has declined. And we face huge challenges in terms of an ageing population, labour supply issues, and rising health costs, to name but a few. I make these points not to score points, but to focus attention on the big challenge. And it is a big challenge. In fact, there is perhaps no greater challenge than rejuvenating our economy. We need a turnaround. And that is going to take time, determination, and collaboration. Our collective future depends on our ability to create more economic activity and do so in a way that is truly sustainable, economically, environmentally, and socially. Extraordinary times call for an extraordinary response. In terms of politics, the lead in that response must come from government, of course. But I'm sure the Minister and his Assistant Minister would acknowledge that neither they nor their department nor even the whole government can solve these problems alone. We must all play our part in this Assembly, and I would say particularly through scrutiny. Interacting with our economic challenges are the complexities of our relations with the rest of the world. Since Brexit, we have found ourselves in a much more unstable international situation, which has posed challenges in terms of issues as varied as our labour supply, visitors from France, and export of fishing produce. The UK itself is still seeking a new role on the international stage, and we are buffeted in the slipstream of this ongoing process. These are difficult waters for us to navigate. So much for the challenges. What of the role of scrutiny, and indeed the role of scrutiny chair, in rising to these challenges? One good thing about this scrutiny panel is that it brings together the whole economy in its remit. Financial services, the rest of the economy, and to the considerable extent that both involve our relations with the outside world, it also includes international relations. It is, in other words, a remarkably coherent brief. The panel therefore starts from a position of strength. It has a complete overview of our economic situation. So, what can I bring to this role? So, it has been my privilege in researching my PhD, in my career as a TV producer, as a minister, and now I hope in scrutiny, to get under the hood of some of the great issues of the day. My job for 20 years in the BBC's science department was to understand complex scientific concepts in order to communicate them. But in politics, the responsibility is perhaps greater. Mere understanding is not enough. It is also necessary to help find answers, to critically engage with the challenges we face, and to help contribute to our collective response to those challenges. So what kind of scrutiny chair can members expect should I be elected? I aim to be collaborative, supportive, and hard-working. In particular, there are two skills that have sustained me through my working life. One, as already mentioned, is the ability to take complex information and understand it relatively quickly. But second, and perhaps most relevant in this context, to get the best out of those around me. Working in television and as a minister is about teamwork. I have learnt over time about the need to incorporate everyone into the team. I know I make mistakes. I get things wrong. But the great thing about teamwork is that you have people around you who can help. If elected, I know I will need to rely on my panel members to compensate for my deficiencies. Forging a team is about getting the best out of everyone, so that collectively we are greater than the sum of our parts. In fact, I'd go further. There is a joy in working together, whether that's with a creative team making television programs, working with officers as a minister, or, I hope, on a scrutiny panel with fellow politicians, and indeed with those members of the public who will also be contributing to the work of the panel. It doesn't always work out, but when it does, it's a lot of fun, and that is what I will be aiming for. I would also say that I would aim very much to draw in relevant expertise and perspectives from our community, whether that is by inviting contributions to panel reports or by seeking to understand public views on particular matters that come before the panel. One other perspective I hope to bring to the work of scrutiny chairs to consider, with other scrutiny chairs, whether there are some pieces of work that would lend themselves to the setting up of separate review panels. One that immediately springs to mind, that is particularly close to my heart, is of course the wind farm, should that continue to be taken forward. But others might be the role of the ALOs, which is likely to be in the spotlight, given that the Controller and Auditor General is conducting her own review, and the work around Pillar 2 in the financial services. So a few more words on the issues that I believe will face the panel in the next couple of years. There is a significant legislative programme coming up. There are amendments to the telecom law coming forward later this year. There is a law on cyber defence. There are amendments being planned to the tourism law, the competition law, heritage law, and shipping law. In financial services and overlapping with international relations, there is the legislation relating to Pillar 2 and potential follow-up work to Moneyval. There will be much for the panel to get its teeth into. But with such a full and wide-ranging programme of ministerial activity to cover, it will be important to focus on a few key areas. As to exactly what will be the focus of the panel's activity, I think it will be important to discuss this with panel members before coming to a definitive position. Framing all the island's work on the economy, the Future Economy programme is a particularly important piece of work. Its focus on sustainable economic growth is vital, and it provides a critically important lens through which to judge all our decision-making around the economy, from the living wage to energy security to digital innovation. Because it is a long-term piece of work, it lends itself to the kind of consensus-seeking approach to scrutiny that I wish to champion. We will not always agree, but my aim is to be as positive as I can in approaching these issues. I'd like to close on a more upbeat note. I started by noting our poor relative economic performance since the turn of the century. However, the work of the Economic and International Affairs Scrutiny Panel has the chance to play a central role in what is one of the defining projects this island faces over the next 20 or 30 years, to rejuvenate our economy and redefine the island's place in the world. My hope is that I can play my part in chairing a constructive, creative, collaborative panel that is able to provide positive challenge to the government, holding to account where necessary, but adding value where we can. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Deputy. I'll move up to 20 minutes of questions, and the first question for Deputy Renouf is from Deputy Ozef.
Thank you, sir. So the candidate started his remarks saying that Jersey's economic growth had been lower than other places. And he went on immediately to say one of the contributory factors, there are a number, was the rate of inflation, and that the rate of inflation was high. Since I'm no longer bound by only commenting on non-domestic matters, and on my conscience for the people of St Saviour, I would be doing a disservice if I didn't ask the candidate whether or not he was willing to get, as he says, his head under the bonnet of the issue of inflation and why it seems that Jersey's inflation rate is most definitely higher than it should be compared to other places, and to look forensically into why that is the case. And I'm talking about competition policy and all that.
I thank the Deputy for the question, and he finishes by starting to answer the question for me, which is helpful. I think the question of competition in the island is clearly an important one, and we operate in a small island economy, and the tension that we have is that if we're not careful, things fall into monopoly situations, and we end up with an uncompetitive economy with too much leverage, pricing leverage exercised by dominant operators. On the other hand, we also have in our pocket, if you like, the ability to regulate through the competition regulation and also through the control of ALOs, where we can exercise control over dominant actors by ownership or other stakes in them. So I think reviewing all of those things and how they interact together is certainly going to be important. And I would say that we might want to consider that in the light of cost of living work that might be also done by the corporate services. So exactly how we address those issues, I think I would like time to reflect along with potentially with panel members, but certainly a very important area of work.
Supplementary?
I don't have one, just that I thank him for putting the importance of it, because inflation is the silent killer, it's the thief, and it's a big issue, and I would urge him to confirm with absolute doubt that he will
you're not answering
prioritise
questions, so it's not appropriate. Deputy Scott.
Thank you, sir. Will the candidate explain what, in his discussions with former panel members, what he perceives to be the challenges in the work of the panel, and will he be pursuing the recommendations of the panel regarding transparency?
Deputy.
So yes, I think the question of the remit of the panel and so on, I think, is something to definitely discuss. I think I highlighted in my speech the wide-ranging nature of the panel, and I think there's going to be it's very important to discuss with both the previous panel members and with the officer, as I already have, how we might focus that work and what we focus that work on. As I've indicated, I don't want to go too far into that at the moment, because I do think I would like the chance to discuss with fellow members of the panel exactly where we want to put our efforts, and indeed with other scrutiny chairs, because I do think there's a job of work to be done in demarcating where where the areas of focus should be.
Supplementary?
Yes, sir. Is the candidate personally supportive of the panel's supply chain review work, and would he have the intention, with the support of his fellow panel members once appointed, of continuing that work?
Yes, so I'm aware of that review, which has been underway since June, I think it is. I think other members have made the point that it is important to finish pieces of work from scrutiny, and I do think, therefore, I would like to finish it. I would make the point, others have made a similar one. You know, in television, when we finished films, we always used to say they were abandoned rather than finished, because you never really finish something. And I think we have to apply the same principle to scrutiny work, that accepting that the work will never be completely finished to the satisfaction that we would like, but that it is important to draw it to a close. So my intention would be to understand more fully how much work has been done and how it can be brought to a close in a timely fashion.
Thank you, Deputy. Conataba St Brelard.
Thank you. So the candidate mentioned in his speech a consultation with residents. How would he propose to reach out to residents for their opinions, given his experience in the media? Thank you, sir.
Deputy.
I'm not sure my experience in the media will help me in this regard, but I think there are several things to think about, two things to think about perhaps. One is communication, and maybe I suppose there is an element of the media work that would be relevant there. I think we do need to communicate the work of scrutiny, and I have tried when I was a minister to try and communicate through social media and so on, but I think we need to look at how we communicate. But I think also in terms of reaching out, I think we can be very specific in some areas in asking for public engagement with the work of a panel. That could be done through commissioning survey work. It could be done through inviting direct contributions to the panel, and so on. So I think there are specific ways that we could do that that would mean that the public voice, not just the public voice, but I think also in terms of key stakeholders when I'm talking about the public in this context. So business, unions, other key stakeholders that we need to engage with in order to make sure that the work of a scrutiny panel is fully rounded.
Yes, so does he intend improving the reach of social media to better get public feedback? Thank you, sir.
So yes, it is something that slightly confounded me in the ministerial position. We were sometimes asked, for example, to put forward, and indeed members who weren't ministers were asked to record videos, for example, to promote a piece of proposition that they were bringing or something. And it struck me that it wasn't a particularly effective way of engaging. I think we need to find slightly more provocative, slightly more slightly more engaging ways of suggesting to the public what it is we're doing. Not here's a proposition or here's a piece of scrutiny work, but a provocative question about the piece of work that we're doing that doesn't frame it in terms of the State's Assembly business, but frames it in terms of the concerns that matter to the public. And I think if we can do that, then social media can work for us. But expecting social media to work for us in the context of here's a video that we've recorded about our proposition or about our scrutiny work, I don't think is the way forward.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy Stevenson.
Thank you, sir, and I'm sure all members will be really surprised with what I'm about to ask. How would the candidate manage conflicts of interest should they arise during the work chairing the panel?
Deputy.
So yes, looking at the minutes of previous meetings and so on, I think it is the second item on the agenda for the panel. I would echo the point that was made earlier that we need to think about conflicts of interest in a slightly broader context in Jersey. I do think that we should be talking, and I don't just include scrutiny panels in this, in terms of government as a whole, we should be acknowledging more the social relationships that underpin our lives that can have an impact. They don't necessarily rule us out from doing anything. They don't stop us from asking questions or voting, but for the transparency purposes, I think it's important that people know where we're coming from in the fullest possible sense. So I would be engaging in a discussion with panel members along those lines.
Thank you, sir. And would the candidate support some training for scrutiny panel members on conflict of interest?
Yes, I think that's something I would look into along with other training, actually, because certainly I've come to this without experience of scrutiny, and I may have covered the UK Parliament on Newsnight for many years, but that was a long time ago. Things have moved on, and I'm sure that I also need to bring myself up to speed. But in terms of the conflicts of interest, yes, I think I also note that the Commissioner for Standards, I think, is doing a review of her terms of reference at the moment, and I think that with PPC, and I think it would be interesting to be part of that, to be feeding into that broader discussion.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy Kovach.
Thank you, sir. What is Deputy's view on the way arm's length organizations operate and are being financed by the government?
Is that 1 minute 30 I have for this? No, in terms of the answer to a single question. I think the...
Well, effectively, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's a big subject the Deputy asks about. My view is that the arm's length organisations are potentially and generally are a huge source of strength for this island. And if you've lived in the UK and seen, for example, the mess that has been made of social housing in the UK and compare it with what we have with Andium, then you can quickly appreciate the strength of that model that we have here. We actually have a very varied set of arm's length organisations here. And so to answer that question in the generality is quite hard. I think there are some relationships that work better with government than with others. But the key overarching point I would make is I think we need to be more interventionist. I hinted at this in questions to candidates for ministerial positions. We need to be more interventionist and more assertive in making clear what it is that we want from the arm's length organisations so that they have clarity around that.
Supplementary?
Yes, please. Would the candidate intend to launch a review into the arm's length organization?
That is one of the three things that I think, in my own mind, are quite high up the list of priorities, because the Controller and Auditor General is already committed to doing that work, to doing a piece of work on the ALOs. It's a big piece of work that she has planned for this year. And it would seem to me that interesting to find out what the scope of that is and what the space might be for scrutiny to be involved with that. Not to make sure we don't duplicate, but to be complementary. And I think this is clearly a moment for us. The work the Auditor General has created a moment where we can review those arm's length organisations in detail, reset where we want them to go. And I think that it would therefore make sense certainly for the Economic and International Affairs panel to take a role in that. Whether it's done as a separate review panel, maybe in cooperation with corporate services, I think we would have to wait and see.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy Rob Ward.
Thank you, sir. I'd like to ask the Deputy a question that was asked of me in my constituency drop-in. So this Assembly has been through a difficult time recently, and it was bound to have left some scars on people. And I'd like to ask the Deputy how he ensure that scrutiny will not be used as a simple opposition to a new government, given the activity we've been through, because this is what was asked me last night. Thank you, sir.
Deputy.
So I've approached scrutiny, I hope, with the sort of professionalism that I've approached most things in my life. I would draw attention to the fact that I was on Newsnight for 6 or 7 years when the separation between analysis, emotion, between analysis and understanding on the one hand, and interpretation and how you might respond to something on the other were very clearly part of my working life, and in fact became part of my DNA. So I think the ability for me to understand the difference between the professional job of work that is required by scrutiny and my own personal politics or anything else to do with me personally, I would hope members would recognise that is perfectly within my competence.
Can I ask the Deputy whether he expects and believes that all members of this Assembly are capable of doing exactly that, i.e. to give you a good choice of members for your scrutiny panel?
I can happily agree with the Deputy. I think, and I would take the opportunity to say that whilst I won't be suggesting any names for the panel were I to be elected today, I would be very much encouraging members to come and talk to me. I'll be very keen to hear from a very diverse set of views. As I made clear in my speech, I am committed to that idea of plurality of views, and I would look forward to working with a wide range of people, not least because I think you learn a lot yourself.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy Gardner.
Thank you, sir. There are 5 positions for the chairs of scrutiny panels and the Public Accounts Committee available today. Would the Deputy explain why he decided to stand for the position specifically of the Economic and International Affairs Scrutiny Panel, and what skills he brings to the table?
Yes, so that's a good question. I think maybe some people might have expected me to jump at the opportunity of standing for the the Environment panel. I think when you come new to the Assembly, you obviously focus initially on the thing that is your greatest passion, I suppose, and that's what I did. But I've always been of the view that the environment is part of the economy. And I was very, very keen in my role as minister to focus on the economic side of that job as well. It interacts all across the portfolio. I have a very long-standing interest in the economy. If anybody who, I'm sure there are many members who followed my newspaper columns before I was elected avidly, and they will have seen that I wrote frequently about the economy. And so for me, it feels like a very natural thing to do to move into this area. And particularly, I think, because of the ministerial and government focus on sustainability within that economic portfolio, not just sustainability in environmental terms, but sustainability in the full sense of the word. So I find it a really, really exciting area. And the skills I bring to it, I hope I went through some of those in my speech. I think the key skill is that teamwork, team building skill, and trying to get the best out of people. That I hope I can bring something to the table.
Supplementary? Thank you. Deputy Jen.
Thank you, sir. Could the candidate explain what his hopes to be able to achieve by the end of the term, so the outcomes by 2026?
I think, yes, I can certainly hope that we will produce a number of scrutiny reports. I would say I don't particularly want to sort of put a number around my neck and leave it as a target to hit. It depends to some extent on how we divide the work up. The scale of a review might be one or two large ones. It might be made up of a number of smaller ones. For example, we might want to look at Digital Jersey and the Impact Jersey Fund, for example, as a small discrete piece of work. We might find several of those pieces of work. Equally, we might find that we're working in collaboration with other scrutiny panels. So I think the key thing is that we can work at pace to produce reports that are produced within a relatively short space of time. I would certainly not want to ever spend more than 6 months on one. We should be producing work at pace and making it relevant. Otherwise, we risk that perpetual going on and on and on, just as I am doing now in my answer, so I'll shut up.
Supplementary. Honourable St Mary.
Thank you, sir. And the candidate has correctly described or referred to the broad responsibilities imposed on this panel, with a view to maximising output of the panel, and depending on the composition of his panel, would he consider giving the lead to individual panel members on certain subjects, much as they do with select committees at Westminster?
Yes, so that's a very interesting and good idea. I think, when I've worked in teams in the past, the greatest pleasure you get is when you sort of see somebody take a piece of work and run with it and make something of it. And often actually you have very little input in that other than recognizing that that's a possibility. And so I would say that that is something that I would definitely hope to do. It feeds into that agenda, which I feel very strongly about, which is that everybody should feel rewarded in their work. Everybody should feel like they're getting something positive out of it, and they should feel that they're being enabled to do good work. And so, where appropriate, that feels like a very good idea.
Thank you. Deputy Howell.
Thank you, sir. Please can the Minister explain how he will listen to the views of all members of the public, even if he may feel such views to be irrelevant? Thank you.
It's not quite the Minister, I'm afraid. That is something which I think I alluded to slightly earlier in terms of the different ways in which we can sample public opinion. We can sample public opinion through structured surveys, through inviting members of the public or relevant organisations to attend upon the committee, to submit evidence to the committee. I don't have any problem at all in dealing with views that might be contrary to mine, and indeed the work of scrutiny chair, it's less relevant what my views are in any case.
Thank you very much, Deputy Reniff. That brings the period of questions to an end. I invite you now to withdraw and for the return of Deputy Tadier.
Very well, Deputy. Do you have your breath?
Thank you, different, sir.
Yes.
Well, are we quorate? I hope we're quorate.
So if the Speaker is himself part of the quorum, we are, but otherwise not, I think.
Thanks, sir. I take it that I'm addressing those who haven't yet made up their minds, but maybe others are meeting in the coffee room and listening from there. Have you ever been to Glencoe, by the way? Glencoe, that famous auction place in St. Lawrence. So you go up there and you may be looking for a fridge or a vacuum cleaner. And there are two that are put together because that's what they do. So they've done all the bits outside. They've sold the cars. They've sold all the bits of granite. They've sold the ploughs. And then you go inside and you see the white goods. And you see two lots of fridges, pretty much identical, slightly different. And the auctioneer says, we've got this great fridge. It's all singing, all dancing. And you bid on it and you just miss out by £5. Someone bids £5 more than you. And then he says, and we've got this fridge, much better than the last one. And of course, because the other person who's been bidding on it has been knocked out, you get it slightly cheaper, and you tell yourself, actually, that's the one I really wanted. And the auctioneer winks at you, sir. I'm not suggesting you're, oh, he's changed. I'm not suggesting you're the auctioneer, sir, or there's any nods or winks going on in here. But let's get this back to basics. I'm not going to stand here and give you the same 10-minute speech that I did before. I'd like it that you take that for read. And I'm going to speak more from the heart than from the head. You know, I spent time preparing that last night, and there were probably things I could have included that I didn't. There were things maybe I did include which I could have cut out. But let's bring this back to the Assembly. It's fundamental that any of the roles that we're choosing today are functions of this Assembly. And it's very interesting that from my side, we receive lots of questions about how on earth is Reform going to perform its job if you're in a party and, you know, I don't know why that's relevant. What I would say is that actually I've been very proud of the way that my colleagues in Reform have handled themselves over the last few years in their scrutiny functions. But I've also been proud of those non-Reform members who have led scrutiny panels and who have also been working hard in PAC and across the benches. And I would ask the Assembly to think very carefully about what it is that they wish scrutiny to look like in the future. Because the question is not whether you can take off your party political hat and do scrutiny objectively. The question is, do we simply want to populate the new scrutiny panels with old ministers who have just been kicked out? Let me speak frankly here. They've got their own experience, and do we simply want it to be a rerun of what some people think happened between 2018 and 2022, where there were elements of political motivation, where you have a head of scrutiny liaison who doesn't agree with and doesn't like, potentially, the current chief minister, and personality politics creeps in? Because there's one thing that's much more toxic than having political differences in a manifesto. It's having personal differences. And to coin a new phrase is perhaps there's nothing so bad as a minister spurned. I'm not suggesting that's the case for any of the ministers who are putting themselves forward, but that's a definite risk for scrutiny. Now let me turn to why I'm also interested in the Economic and International Affairs Scrutiny Panel. Again, this isn't just a second choice. It so happens that corporate services is called first, economic affairs called second. There is a key difference, of course. Corporate services has to scrutinise, for example, the whole of the government plan, so where other departments scrutinise their own ministers directly, corporate services don't need to do more. So clearly the Assembly thinks that I'm not as best placed as somebody else to do that job, but I hope that the Assembly would consider me for the Economic and International Affairs Scrutiny Panel. I will, of course, wait for questions, but one of the key areas that I would like to highlight that I think the current Minister needs to be congratulated on, and I hope he will continue with the support of his two new Assistant Ministers, is the increasing work that's being done with France. So the Minister is proactively continuing work of previous administrations, building stronger links with the region of Normandy, the Département de la Manche, and also looking away automatically from the UK for all of our trade and commercial links to the Région de Normandy, and hopefully Brittany. There's also a piece of work going on in the Future Economy programme that is looking at educational links with Caen, with Rennes, with those business schools over there. And I fundamentally think it would be a useful thing if you had a chair leading the Economic and International Affairs panel who actually is very conversant, not just with the language of French, but also the culture and some of the personalities that there are out there. Not because I'll be meeting them, but because I'll know exactly what it is that the Minister and the Department are having to do in that regard. So there will no doubt be other areas. I mentioned in a previous speech that when the OECD Pillar 2 review comes forward, it will be necessary for both corporate services and my panel, if I'm successful in this, to work collaboratively together. And I look forward to doing that with the former Minister for Home Affairs in her new role. So I'm going to cut the speech short there to give members time to come back in and to think about questions they may want to ask me. What I would ask is that I sometimes feel you can't do right for doing wrong in this Assembly. If on the one hand you stand up and say, look, I've got all of this political experience, I've done scrutiny in so many different iterations, I've learnt so much over that period of time and that process, and I feel that 15 years later, I'm the better person for it, I've changed, I'm more sensitive to the needs of scrutiny and I can do it excellently. You might be said, actually, you're entitled. Do you think we're automatically going to give you that job? By no means, I don't take this Assembly for granted. And on the other hand, you could be a minister who's just come in, who's recently been elected and appointed for the first time as a minister. You've never done scrutiny before, you find yourself kicked out of government, and then you say, what jobs are available? I'd like to go for a scrutiny chair. Similarly, bringing a different level of experience from perhaps a past professional background, but with no scrutiny experience. And other members will say, you're entitled. So first of all, let's congratulate all those members who have put themselves forward. I would hope that members elect the chairs on merit, not simply on some party political basis, but let's see what comes from questions. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Deputy. We now have up to 20 minutes of questions. Questions, please. The first one from Deputy Scott.
Thank you, sir. Could the candidate please say whether he has any intention to carry forward the work of the panel with respect to transparency and to look at its recommendations in that respect?
Deputy.
The member will have heard my opening speech in the last debate, so to speak, where I put transparency and evidence-based approaches at the fundamental level. And clearly, if there are elements where she thinks previous departments have not been fully transparent, then I would certainly look to continue that and follow up on that review if necessary.
Supplementary?
Yes, please, sir. And with the candidate, what's the candidate's position with respect to the panel's supply chain review? Would he consider continuing it with the support of his fellow panel members and looking into the viability of both the southern and northern route in terms of overall volumes?
I think the new Assistant Minister has really touched on something fundamental there, is that our vulnerability to the weather and to disruption in the supply chain is fundamental. And clearly, if the Minister is looking to establish stronger links which are more resilient, then my job as a scrutiny chair would be to make sure that we see that the Minister can achieve those objectives effectively by giving proper and constructive feedback to achieve those objectives.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy Jeanne.
Thank you, sir. Would the candidate outline his intended outcomes by 2026? So what does the candidate hope to achieve by the end of his term?
Again, I remind the member that I'm not the Minister and I shouldn't seek to be the Minister. So my outcomes will be to make sure that government objectives, which especially when they've been endorsed by this Assembly, are being achieved, that they're being done with due process and that they're achieving the outcomes that they seek to achieve. And I think that's a process where you have to monitor in real time, but also you have to monitor it once the policy has come to fruition.
Supplementary?
Yes, sir. Can the candidate specifically say some of the areas under the scrutiny panel that's happened recently with launched by the Minister that he could think of to bring to review, for example?
Well, where do we start? I mean, Condor is one of the first things we've heard that there have been issues there with correspondence from Condor that the Minister forgot to advise the Assembly about. There's also, Condor is a monopoly in Jersey, and I think it's really important that when that contract comes up for renewal, we look at all options and that we're open-minded to building in that resilience for the future, but also things like the Future Economy Programme. It's a perennial issue about sustainability, but also diversification of the economy, digital Jersey. And also, I'm very interested in this new project that's coming about to do with potentially creating a university for Jersey, for the student economy in Jersey, and what that means for both local students and a potential for encouraging young people to come to this island to study, but then hopefully to stay and also to work. So those are areas which I think will keep me and the panel busy.
Thank you, Deputy. Are there any other questions for Deputy Teddier? Conor St Mary, then Deputy Craig.
Thanks, sir. And I asked the candidate the same question I asked of the previous candidate. The brief covered by this panel is quite extensive. Would the candidate, if successful, consider, depending on the composition, expertise available to him through other members, would he consider giving the lead on certain subjects to other members to enable optimum output of the panel, which I believe is the situation that applies at Westminster?
Yeah, I thank the Constable for that question. We've worked together on a panel. I think I've worked under different chairs, and I think that's not done enough. Scrutiny panels have got the ability to set up sub-panels and to co-op members, and to also give members of their panel the ability to chair sub-panels. So you can't co-opt someone from a different panel, I don't think, and ask them to chair. But I think it's really important that we value the expertise of all panel members. Clearly, there's an officer involved as well, and you can draft in advisors as and when we need them to be brought in. So absolutely, the answer is yes to that.
Deputy Kovach.
Thank you, sir. I'll ask the same question like the other candidate. What is Deputy's view on the way the arm's length organization operate and they're financed by the government?
So there are quite a lot of arm's length organisations that come under this remit and the Minister's remits. So, for example, I'm very familiar with the ones that relate to culture and art. But there are also the likes of the States of Jersey Development Company. I've not forgotten to call it the States of Jersey Development Company. I know the Constable of St Lawrence will be pleased with me for that. There's Andium, and I think we need to look across at all of those because they are different entities, and you know, one size doesn't always fit all. And if I can focus actually very quickly on States of Jersey Development Company and Andium, you see one body there, which is a social housing provider, which provides revenue back to the Assembly, and you've got to ask questions, I think, in the round about efficiency and effectiveness about all of those ALOs, what they're there to do, are they delivering, and if we think that there are changes that need to be made in the framework that they operate, we shouldn't be afraid of recommending that to the Minister if it's evidence-based.
Supplementary.
And would the candidate intend to launch a review on the LOs?
So I haven't made any hard and fast decision about what reviews. I'd be open to doing that if the evidence is there, if members of the panel believe that there's merit in doing that, then I think that's an area where I'd be quite comfortable. It will be a big piece of work, so it might need to be broken down into certain sectors in a piecemeal approach, but or rather an iterative approach, I would say. But certainly I'd be open to that.
Thank you. Are there any more questions for Deputy Tadier? Yes, Deputy Wilson.
Thank you, sir. Could the candidate explain what skills and experience he would look to secure in terms of the membership of his panel?
So I think we're lucky in this Assembly. We often do ourselves down is that there are 49 of us who bring different both life experience, work experience and experience in this Assembly. And I think we have to recognise all of that. So I would look, as I've said in a previous speech, to get a cross-section of members. First of all, you want people on your panel who want to be on your panel, and you want people who feel that they can work with you under your leadership, but knowing that being a leader of a panel is to bring out the best in all of your panel members. So what I would, on a day-to-day basis, you do that by making sure everyone's involved in questioning and delegating leads for different reviews and different questioning seminars to different members.
Supplementary. Thank you. Deputy Southern.
Thank you, sir. I'll ask the question asked previously of the previous candidate. What constitutes productivity in scrutiny terms, and how would the candidate propose measuring?
I think quality always has to come before quantity, but similarly, I'd be very suspicious if there was a scrutiny panel which isn't producing many reports. Like I said in the early days of my involvement in scrutiny, I think we were fairly prolific. You have short, focused hearings. You know what you're trying to achieve. You get the evidence that you need from all the stakeholders. You synthesize and scrutinize those results into obviously findings and recommendations. And I think the key is to not let meetings go on any longer than they need to, but make sure that everybody has the chance to say everything they need to on both sides of the table.
Are there any further questions? Deputy Andrews.
Thank you, sir. I would like the candidate to express his personal view on the supply chain resilience review that the previous iteration of the Economic and International Affairs panel were responsible for. As scrutiny is responsible for scrutinising ministers, what is his view on the panel conducting that review when it's an arm's length organisation that is essentially responsible for the supply chain resilience mechanism may be moving, they're responsible for the supply chain resilience impact for the island moving forward, and whether he would maybe express his opinion on whether the review might be closed or if it may be potentially continued.
So could I ask for clarification? What ALO is he talking about that's responsible?
Ports of Jersey.
For the supply chain, yeah, thank you. As I touched on earlier to Deputy Scott's question, I think I would be happy to continue that piece of work. I will look at where it's got to. I will speak to the officer and previous members of the panel. I believe that the current questioner is a member of that panel. or he was, and he knows about that, and look to continue that if it needs to be done. Our supply chains are of fundamental importance to Jersey. I think the way that we allocate responsibility through ALOs is just the way it's been chosen to be delivered. There are many methods that could have been chosen. I wouldn't seek to impose a new methodology, but I think it's important that we make sure that all of our ALOs, Ports of Jersey included, are delivering the outcomes that they've been set by this Assembly and the government.
Any further questions for Deputy Tadier? In that case, this series of questions is brought to a close, and I invite Deputy Breniff to return to the chamber.
They look like two naughty kids.
So, point of order, sir. Just that's not a finable offence, is it?
No, it's not.
There's no financial penalty.
Were you meant to pick up the mace at that point?
I'd probably hit myself first.
So I apologise. I would just like to say that I did check with my escort before I came in the right route, but having noticed that Deputy Tadier was delayed, I thought I'd be quicker, but I apologise.
As there are two candidates, the electronic voting system shall be used. Any member wishing to vote for Deputy Breniff should press the pour button. Any member voting for Deputy Tadier should press the conch button. Members, of course, may abstain in the usual way. I invite members to return to their seats and the greffier to open the voting. If all members have the opportunity of casting their votes, then I ask the greffier to close the voting. And the votes cast are as follows. Sorry?
I'm just confirming so that I'm unable to vote.
You're unable to vote. Yes. Deputy Breniff, 17 votes. Deputy Tadier, 24 votes and 1 abstention. I therefore declare Deputy Tadier has been elected as chair of that panel.
So, if I'm not too late, can I ask for the names to be read out, please?
Yes, you may.
Those members voting for Deputy Breniff, the Conotaba, St Martin, St John and St Mary, and Deputies Doublé, Ayer, Gardner, Osif, Balash, War, Miles, Breniff, Jearn, Miller, Perry, Alex Curtis, Wilson and Stevenson. Those members voting for Deputy Tadier, the Conotaba, St Helier, St Brelard, Trinity, St Peter, St Clement, Grouville, St Juan and St Saviour, and Deputies Southern, Tadier, The Hegera, Rob Ward, Alves, Messick, Coles, Porre, Catherine Curtis, Feltham, Rose Binet, Howell, Tom Binet, Kovac, Barbara Ward and Andrews, and Deputy Scott abstained.
In accordance with Standing Order 120, the Assembly is due to appoint a new chair of the Environment, Housing and Infrastructure Scrutiny Panel. In accordance with Standing Order 121D, the Ministers for the Environment, Housing and Communities and Infrastructure should neither nominate nor vote in relation to this appointment, although they may ask questions. Deputy Coles.
So I'd just like to take this opportunity to nominate Deputy Jean for this position.
Is that seconded?
Yes, sir.
Are there any other nominations? Deputy Jean, you now have up to 10 minutes to address the Assembly.
Thank you, sir. I'd first like to thank the current panel for their contributions this term, knowing that the majority are now in government roles, and I look forward to working with some of them that interact with this role. I seek support for my candidacy as chair of this panel because I believe I could bring to this role a robust work ethic, critical analytical skills, and a collaborative approach. I will lead the panel to produce work of quality and the type of constructive scrutiny that improves policy and its application, crucial for good governance. Though a newcomer to this position, my extensive experience will feed into the qualities needed for making this role effective. I've experienced chairing complex environments, from chairing the past government of Jersey's Future Energies Ministerial Working Group, working with 6 ministers and senior officers, to leading diverse civil society groups from across the global north and global south, uniting the varied perspectives into singular positions to be presented at either UN or EU negotiations. For example, during the Financing for Development Agenda process, where UN members were part of complex negotiations on the utilisation of private and public funds, from taxation, grants, concessional loans to enhancing trade, resolving the debt crisis, and utilising guarantees to attract private finance. I also led a diverse group of non-governmental organisations in monitoring and scrutinising sections of the EU's budget and the multi-financial framework. Policy commitments are essential, but without sufficient funding, realising these commitments becomes nearly impossible. Supporting non-governmental organisations and business associations, my leadership focused on ensuring we scrutinised government's implementation of international and regional agreements and legislation, provided evidence-based reports to highlight areas of concern, supported impacted stakeholders bringing their voices and experiences to decision makers, and provided specific recommendations to complex policy agendas. Another area I worked on in Brussels was scrutinising policy coherence to ensure there were synergies towards achieving agreed objectives across the European Commission. For this panel especially, the 3 ministers will need to work together to ensure policy coherence. Currently, there is a network of problems that need negotiation and resolution. The panel will be able to monitor that overview and how ministers work together to unpick these big problems quickly, properly, coherently, and safely. Currently, as chair of JAF, Jersey's youth homelessness charity, I guide the organisation through navigating complexities in providing subsidised social housing, facilitating young adults' access to government support for various needs, including housing, education, employment, and healthcare, and breaking barriers to independent living. As you can see, I have experience holding power to account. But continuous learning is paramount, and I value the opportunities provided by the CPA and the GREF to enhance my skills. It will always be important to learn from and work well with the panel's scrutiny officer, who has vast experience in the role of scrutiny. And I also hope to build an effective, inclusive, and diverse team that can support me in ensuring I deliver the role effectively. And at this stage, sir, I welcome members to contact me who are interested in joining the panel. And part of scrutiny's function is to gather data, information, consulting, collating evidence. Therefore, to do this well, it will be important to build relations with stakeholders, as scrutiny is the space they can come to raise concerns, request a specific focus on government plans and ministers' priorities, and feel listened to. Building relations with the 3 ministers, as well as the Treasury Minister and their offices, will be essential to enhance open and respectful relationships. And I've met with the scrutiny officer already to understand where the panel was in its forward work programme and what is needed going forward. A few key areas to mention, but of course this could change, and the first job will be for the newly formed panel to come together and reassess and decide together the work programme in light of the new government and ministerial priorities. Scoping for the Marine Spatial Plan review is currently underway, and after the panel hears from the Minister and officers on any amendments to the direction of travel or timeline, I will suggest to the panel that we should evaluate if the scoping in terms of reference needs amending. The panel is waiting on the publication of the consultation and the proposed residential tenancy law amendments. Regarding the consultation, it will be important for the panel to engage with stakeholders to assess whether there was a balanced representation of the different stakeholders' inputs, that the right information was asked for in a timely manner, and that submissions were properly taken into account. I noted that the Minister for Environment in his speech was wanting to expedite a renewed energy strategy, which could be a key part of the panel's work down the line, and part of this would be further developments on the wind farm. Here I believe there needs to be a more collaborative approach across scrutiny panels and with the executive, and would be happy to explore what type of mechanisms can be developed for this. The delivery of the carbon neutral roadmap should remain a priority for the panel, especially noting the Minister described a refocus in his speech and with the need to expedite the long-term financing strategy. This is also an example of policy coherence, where the carbon neutral roadmap falls into two, if not all three, ministers' remit. We have, of course, heard from all three ministers regarding the planning process and the need for finding sites for more affordable housing. I foresee the panel redirecting some of the work programme to focus more in this area as the Council of Ministers' plans in this area progress. And the panel is waiting for ministers' responses on the Bridging a Liquid Waste Strategy review, an area I'm sure the panel would want to continue to monitor, especially as this is one of the hurdles to the delivery of more affordable housing. The panel is also waiting for two of the ministers' responses on the government plan, and there are a number of areas identified there that could be monitored by the new panel in 2024, depending on the new focus and strategic direction of the new government. Added to this, there is a need for developing more longer-term financing strategies for a number of key priority work streams and projects, namely, I've already said the Climate Emergency Fund, but also the liquid waste charging, shoreline management plan, coastal adaptation projects, maintenance and investment in the public estate, and the water strategy. I would work with the panel on how we can monitor these developments and where our specific focus could be. Looking forward, some other key areas that do pique my interest would be the implementation of the Sustainable Transport Strategy, the Homelessness Strategy, and the impact of changes to the Affordable Gateway Scheme and how the government works with the JPH and SOJDC. The panel may also consider reviewing how the government is preparing for the first review of the UK-EU TCA in 2026, particularly concerning its impact on our fisheries. Sir, it is important to put the last month behind us and work together to get stuff done effectively and with a positive impact for the Jersey community and our environment. I know we are all proud of Jersey as a place of outstanding beauty. We must protect it, but to do this, we need cohesive policies that work together, a balance providing affordable homes for islanders, workplaces for businesses and essential infrastructure, all while responsibly managing our scarce resource of our land, our sea and our coastline. I would therefore like to ask the Assembly to support me to scrutinise all this vital work as a critical friend. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Chairman. We now have up to 20 minutes of questions, and the first question is from the Connotab of St Brelard.
Thank you, sir. The existing TCA came about as a result of protracted negotiations with the UK and particularly Brussels. The candidate referred to her experience in Brussels and its associated quagmire of administration with which we've had to deal. How would she view the 2026 TCA being discussed to the benefit of our fishing fleet? Thank you, sir.
Deputy.
I thank the Deputy for his question. I really think this is a difficult one to answer because it really depends, I think, on the UK government and how they will, and potentially there will be a new government in place in 2026, and how they foresee this review as well. I know that there has been discussions, for example, about the EU, for example, focusing maybe more on an energy supply rather than on fisheries, and therefore maybe their eyes will be taken into another area than the fishery, and that could be of benefit for Jersey to help discuss. But of course, it's a review. It's not a necessary renegotiation, and so that is up for the UK and the EU to make that decision when it comes to that moment.
Supplementary?
So just will the candidate confirm her support of Jersey's fishing industry in the reviews that she undertakes? Thank you, sir.
Absolutely, of course, I absolutely support Jersey's fishery in this regard. Thanks.
Thank you. Deputy Stevenson.
Thank you, sir. How would the candidate manage conflicts of interest should they arise during her work chairing the panel?
Thank you, sir, and it's no surprise that I think my answer will be very similar to the others who have gone before me, but of course the Code of Conduct is clear, and this is something that I will hold myself and the panel to account on, and I have always done this as a member of this Assembly as well. But it's important that, again, it's a standing item on the agenda and it is given that due attention every time that the panel would meet. But I also do think that I know Deputy Miles and Deputy Renouf have mentioned about a wider discussion beyond the panels, but within this Assembly, about that wider discussion bringing forward discussions on personal relationships and how we can deal with that as an Assembly around the Code of Conduct. But of course that is specifically for the Assembly and not potentially for the specific scrutiny panel.
Supplementary?
Would the member support training for scrutiny panel members on conflict of interest?
Yes, absolutely. And I think as also the Commissioner for Standards also develops her role, and we see how that works for Jersey, I think it's important that we also all look for retraining in this area and see where there are elements where we could see to enhance our training in that aspect.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy Scott.
Thank you, sir. Aside from her Assistant Minister role, has the candidate had any direct engagement with the planning process as a third party or in the Bridging Island plan consultation to help inform her in her new role and to help her empathise with those who find them problematic?
Thank the Deputy for her question. I have for a number of years been elected member of the Committee Rurale for St John. The Committee Rurale is a constituted committee in the parish of St John to specifically look at proposals and planning decisions in St John's, and I was very much part of that discussions when the Bridging Island plan was being negotiated, and helped develop some submissions into that.
Supplementary?
Yes, sir. With respect to the oncoming island plan review, one element that is important to the economy is, of course, the impact on I'm going to start that question again because I think it's too rambling. Sorry about that. With respect to the current Bridging Island plan, its emphasis being very much on environmental areas, will the candidate be mindful of the gaps in process regarding economic development, and does she propose to involve her scrutiny panel more closely in economic development issues as well?
Thank the Deputy for her question. I think that will be important for the panel when, as the island plan is launched, that the review invites a number of stakeholders to come and bring their experiences of engaging with the Bridging Island plan, and of course that would include, of course, businesses who are interacting with that Bridging Island plan. So that would be important to gather that evidence base of those who have already been engaging with the Bridging Island plan as a starter in this regard. So that is a very important part of any island plan to bring the economy in that regard.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy Labby.
Will the Deputy undertake to consult with the local fishing industry over the marine spatial plan?
have to thank the Deputy for her question. Absolutely, as part of the Marine Spatial Plan review, that would be the first thing that we would look at, not only, as I said in my speech, reviewing the scoping that has currently been drafted and make sure that that fits within what the new Minister and the Council of Ministers would feel the timeline and the content of it would be, but also to also listen and from the different stakeholders that are affected by the Marine Spatial Plan to hear how they feel about it. Of course, the consultation has already been happening, and as I said in my speech, it'd be important to also hear from stakeholders how they felt that consultation went as well. So that can also feed into how the panel responds to in the review.
Supplementary? Any further questions for Deputy Chair? Deputy Tadeo.
Yeah, so when it comes to renewable energy, does the candidate have a view about what she anticipates coming forward in terms of policy and legislation, and when she might expect the panel to start to reviewing that?
I think that really depends on the new minister and how and the priorities that are put forward. I know we have the proposition from the Council of Ministers still tabled for the wind farm. And so this is one particular area of renewable energy that would be there. But of course, as the Minister in his nomination speech suggested, there needs to be an energy strategy that come fast to Assembly that would be important to review as a whole and look at all the different elements of renewable energy that the island could potentially generate.
Would the candidate also be interested in looking at different models of ownership when it comes to the infrastructure of renewable energy in the future, and what would she see as the role of the scrutiny panel to play in that particular decision?
Thank the Deputy for his question. It's a very interesting question. I think that it's, as the scrutiny panel is there to scrutinise, I think it's important that we hear from the Minister and how they feel about the alternative ownership structures that are available, and there's some very interesting examples coming out of the UK at the moment in that regard. But also it's very important that we listen to stakeholders. So of course we would invite those who are providing our energy in Jersey to talk us through those particular, and if there is any that come with those alternative models and examples, and show us as a panel that they could potentially be done here, then we obviously are there to listen.
Any further questions for the Deputy? Deputy Joseph.
So I ask a question, because there's no other questions coming forward. The Assistant Minister was a very highly respected Assistant Minister and had to make some difficult decisions, one of which was challenged by a Royal Court judgment. Could she just say, and I've read that, and it did make a number of observations, in her discharging of scrutiny and in the spirit that we always need to learn from the decisions, and if you've never made a decision, you've never made a mistake, does the candidate, has she learned something from that experience of being as an Assistant Minister and take that into scrutiny? Because I think she knows what I'm saying. I don't want to...
Thank you for the question. Of course, as I said in my speech, continuous learning is something that I find is very important. Of course, the scrutiny panel will be a team, and I am hoping that a diverse and cross-section of this Assembly will join me, and I hope, therefore, they will then hold me to account and hold me up as a leader and how the chair should be in acting in discharging their duties. But I think that a specific decision was something to show that I have a decision. I made the decision. I still stand by that decision. And ultimately, the court, if we boil it down, said that there wasn't enough information provided. I would have been happy to have provided that more information, but circumstances meant that I preferred and made the decision to withdraw. And again, I hope that the Assembly sees that I can make difficult decisions and stand by my decisions, but happy to also very much consult with my team and make sure that we are doing anything as the panel together which will be important for my team going forward.
Supplementary?
I'm grateful for the candidate's answer.
Thank you. Any further? Oh, Deputy Sadier.
Thank you, sir. The previous Environment Minister said in his personal election manifesto that he was interested in, he thought the role of planning and environment should be split. Does the future chair of this panel believe that there's any merit in doing perhaps a preemptive scrutiny review onto how the roles of planning and environment sit with one person and one minister, and whether that in fact serves the best interest of the public?
I thank the Deputy for his question. It's a really interesting question, and one that I know has been discussed in the past Council of Ministers, and I'm sure in this one as well. I think the first thing for me to do is it would be to talk to the panel members and decide what kind of reviews we should do. As I have outlined, there is a lot to do in and review in this particular panel, and so we need to make sure we can prioritise. As the Deputy himself said earlier, it's about quality, not quantity, and so I think it's really important that we sit down as a team, as a panel, with the scrutiny officer, and after talking with ministers, to really see what are the real needs for the island, and then go from there. So I wouldn't want to put a definite on that particular one, but I will take that into account, and his thoughts into account when we take that to the panel.
Are there any further questions for the Deputy? Yes. Supplementary?
It's not a supplementary, but it's a different question. If there's no other members.
Well, there's another question then, yes.
In terms of the composition of her panel, does the future chair believe that she'll be able to attract a diverse membership of the panel, and does she think that having a diverse group of members on the panel would be beneficial, and for what reasons?
Thank you for the question. Yes, I do hope I can attract a diverse range of members onto the panel. It's also a very interesting panel. That's why I stood to be chair. I think, as you know, we've heard from the ministers last week, and within my speech, I think this is really important. Part of the cost of living crisis is access to affordable housing, and this needs to be balanced with, as I said in my speech, the environment and the scarce resource of our land, and I'm sure that we don't negatively affect the environment. So it's really interesting, and something that you know, the three ministers have to work together. So it's I hope an attractive scrutiny panel to work on, and people would want to work with me on this. And I would hope that the members who come will bring those different experiences, as even the Deputy himself said in his standing. There was different members bring life experiences, work experiences, and also experiences from our current roles here. And so I hope that we can pull a team together that has that, because it is a diverse and very breadth of issues that are on this panel.
St Mary.
Thank you, sir. In the course of the previous panel's review as to the introduction of standards for rented properties, the panel heard from many landlords who are clearly almost aggrieved at what they perceive is a perception of how they react, and that most of them are, of course, good landlords and wish to implement those standards. Does the candidate have any preconceived ideas as to how she might allay their fears on that point?
Thank you for your question, and obviously with the question earlier about conflicts of interest, I'd like to let members know that I'm not only a landlord, but my husband is a member of the JLA. This is on my declaration, so I do understand what the concerns are of landlords, and I think that needs to be balanced. And I was very much involved in those discussions around how to make a balanced legislation around the rent dwellings. And I know that the guidance is the very important part, and that should be coming soon before legislation is enacted. So we, as a panel, that would be very important to, again, engage landlords and tenants into looking at the guidelines and making sure that they are acceptable and clear and able to then be actually implemented.
I thank the candidate for her answer, and no separate anything.
Deputy Joseph.
Thank you, sir. The candidate will be aware from her international experience that there is, she's just asked questions about conflicts of interest. And I observe from having looked up the responsibilities of environment ministers when trying to defend the fact that our last environment minister was right to go to COP28, I realised that actually no other environment minister has the responsibilities for planning in any of the places except one state in Australia. And there is that because there is a conflict of interest between the natural environment and the built environment. Given her undoubted international knowledge, how will she, in discharging her role as the panel, is she prepared to listen to those arguments which have been accepted elsewhere around the world, and what would she do about them?
Thank the Deputy for his question, and I think, in answering the question that was there before from Deputy Tadier, I think the first point is to discuss with the other panel members to see that this is this where we want to go with this review, and part of that review would be looking at how this is done, the role between planning and environment is done elsewhere. I think that would be an important part of that. Any review would be looking how it's discharged elsewhere, and I think it's really important. I mean, there is obviously inherent conflict with the natural environment and urban environment, but it's very important that the natural environment becomes also part of the urban environment as well. We always talk about well-being and the importance of the natural environment being within urban spaces as well. The Conor Kitab of St Helier, for example, always is talking about the need for access to open spaces and how the public realm is supported by natural environments. So, it is also not inherently conflict, but also it needs to be combined together. So for my particular role within scrutiny, I think it's really important that we would first have an evidence-based review or of the other systems around the world before we would be able to comment further.
I'm grateful for the candidate's answer. Was she aware that in her absolutely brilliant remarks about the importance of the natural environment, that the way that other countries have done that conflict is by separating it so you have a champion for both, equal? And was she aware that that is the international best practice that other countries have dealt with and dealt with well?
I'm not aware of every other country. I own property in Belgium, so I do have an understanding of the planning system in Belgium, and I can tell you it's very interesting reading it in Dutch and French. Imagine reading it in English and then having to do it in Dutch and French. So it's something that I've learnt the last few years. But I don't want to come into the scrutiny panel with preconceived ideas. This is not about me having my own politics or my own understanding. It's about being non-biased and scrutinising our ministers and Jersey system. And therefore, of course, part of that is to have evidence from other countries to inform us. But the first and foremost, it's about Jersey.
Thank you very much. That brings the time for questions to an end, and I can confirm that Deputy Jen has been appointed Chair of the Environment, Housing and Infrastructure Panel.
I'd just like to thank the members for their support, and would like to, of course, again ask if any members would like to come and talk to me about being part of the panel. I welcome everybody.
Thank you, Deputy Chair. In accordance with Standing Order 120, the Assembly is due to appoint a new Chair of the Health...
Sir, sorry to interrupt. I wonder, with this amount of time left, whether we should consider an early adjournment before we take on the new one, given that that's going to be... could be a long process if there are a number of people standing.
We at least find out what the nominations are. So
are you content for us to find out how many nominees there are?
Yes.
Before you
Fine,
make the
sir. That's a
proposition?
very good idea, sir. Yeah.
Yes, in accordance with Standing Order 121E, The Ministers for Health and Social Services and Social Security should neither nominate nor vote in relation to this appointment, though both are able to ask questions. I invite members to make nominations for the chair of this panel. Deputy Miles.
Thank you, sir. I'd like to nominate Deputy Louise Dublé for this role.
Is that nomination seconded?
Yes, sir.
Are there any other nominations? Deputy Kovac.
Thank you. Can I nominate Deputy Beatrice Porret?
Thank you. Is that seconded?
Yes, sir.
Are there any other nominations? So there are two nominations, Deputy Dublé and Deputy Porret. Are you proposing the adjournment now?
Yes, so given there are two people, it's going to be unfair on one of them to have a huge gap because I think they'll have to sit in isolation for 2.5 hours, which they might like, sir. I don't know, but I would propose the adjournment if possible.
Is the adjournment, is that proposal seconded? Yes, sir. Are members content to adjourn now until 2:15? Assembly is adjourned until 2:15.